Tonight, a man will die for touching something that doesn't belong to him. Chicago doesn't forgive the weak, and Celine Vale has just become the fatal weakness of the city's most dangerous man. 3 bullets, a dark alley, and a decision that will stain this winter red. This is a story of love born from violence, where the line between protector and possessor is as thin as a razor blade. Watch to the end, like, and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has come. The first time Lucien Moretti saw Celine Vale, she was wiping blood off a dinner plate. Not her blood. Not yet. A drunk hedge fund manager had smashed his whiskey glass against the marble bar at Belladonna's 20 minutes earlier, screaming about market losses nobody gave a damn about. Celine cleaned up the wreckage without flinching, her hands steady even as crimson mixed with melted ice across white porcelain. She didn't look scared, didn't look angry, just looked tired in a way that made Lucien stop mid-conversation with his attorney and watch her like she was something he didn't have a word for yet. Carlo Rossetti, his consigliere, noticed immediately. "Boss?" Lucien didn't answer. He was too busy cataloging details. The way she held her shoulders too rigid for someone just carrying plates. The practiced smile that never reached her eyes. The deliberate space she maintained between herself and every male customer, like she'd learned the hard way that proximity cost something. She moved through the restaurant like a ghost trying not to be seen, and Lucien Moretti built his empire by seeing everything everyone else missed. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. Carlo followed his gaze. "New server. Started maybe 2 months ago. Keeps to herself." "Why?" Lucien didn't answer that either because he didn't have an answer that made sense. He ran Chicago's most ruthless criminal network. He trafficked in violence, leverage, and fear. Beautiful women approached him constantly. Models, socialites, daughters of politicians trying to buy favor through skin and perfume. None of them looked at the world the way this girl did, like she was expecting it to hurt her again any second. 3 hours later, Lucien was still at the bar nursing Macallan 25 when Adrian Cross walked through the door. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lucien recognized the type before the man's coat hit the rack. Upper middle management corporate. Expensive watch trying too hard. Handsome in that catalog bland way that women's mothers approved of. And moving through the restaurant with the territorial aggression of someone looking for something he believed belonged to him. Celine was clearing table 7 when she saw him. Every drop of color drained from her face. Lucien watched her freeze mid-reach, wine glass suspended in her hand like time itself stopped moving. Her breathing changed, short, shallow, the kind of panicked rhythm prey animals made right before teeth found their throat. She stepped backward instinctively, her spine hitting the wall behind her hard enough that the impact probably hurt. Adrian smiled. Not warmly, victoriously. "Celine." His voice carried across the dining room with false affection wrapped around something poisonous underneath. "We need to talk." She shook her head. "I'm working." "Then get off work." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" Adrian crossed the space between them in 4 long strides, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist before she could retreat further. His fingers dug in with practiced cruelty disguised as urgency. 3 months, Celine. 3 months of you ignoring my calls, my messages, my attempts to fix what you broke. I broke? Her voice came out strangled. Adrian, you showed up at my apartment at 2 in the morning because you wouldn't answer your phone. Because I don't want to talk to you. The restaurant went silent. 50 customers and a dozen staff members suddenly found their plates fascinating. Nobody moved, nobody intervened, just another ugly domestic scene playing out in public while strangers pretended not to notice. Except Lucien Moretti didn't pretend anything. He rose from his seat with the smooth, unhurried grace of an apex predator that never needed to announce itself. The movement alone caused 3 of his men positioned around the room to straighten instinctively. Carlo appeared at his elbow like a shadow given human form. "Boss, don't stay," Lucien said quietly. He crossed the restaurant floor while Adrian continued his performance, oblivious. The man had Celine's wrist twisted at an angle that made her grimace, his face inches from hers, his voice dropping to that venomous whisper abusers used when they wanted to terrorize without witnesses. "You think you're better than me now? You think working in this shithole makes you independent? You're nothing without... Let her go." 3 words, delivered in a tone that could freeze nitrogen. Adrian spun around, his expression contorting from possessive fury to indignant offense in half a second. Excuse me? This is a private conversation. Lucien looked past him directly at Celine. Is it? She stared back at him with wide, desperate eyes that held 3 months of accumulated fear and something else underneath. Something like hope suffocating under layers of learned helplessness. Her voice cracked. I want him to leave. You heard her, Lucien said, his gaze finally shifting to Adrian with the clinical detachment of a surgeon deciding where to cut first. Adrian's face flushed red. Who the fuck do you think you are? Wrong question. Carlo winced audibly from across the room. 2 of Lucien's men moved closer without being asked, their presence suddenly oppressive in the intimate dining space. Lucien smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I think I'm the man telling you to leave before you stop being able to. Is that a threat? No. Lucien's voice remained perfectly calm, perfectly pleasant, perfectly terrifying. A threat implies uncertainty about consequences. I'm stating observable fact. You're hurting someone in my establishment. That makes you a problem. Problems get solved, usually permanently. The weight of his reputation crashed down on Adrian all at once. You didn't live in Chicago without knowing the name Moretti, without understanding what it meant when Lucien Moretti personally addressed your existence. Politicians paid tribute to him. Police commissioners looked the other way. Rival organizations sent envoys with offerings rather than risk confrontation. Men who crossed him disappeared into the industrial bowels of the South Side and never surfaced again. Adrian's hand dropped from Celine's wrist like she'd suddenly caught fire. I wasn't. He stumbled backward, his earlier bravado evaporating into barely contained panic. This is between me and her. Not anymore. Lucien stepped forward precisely once, just one step, but it carried the weight of a closing trap. You're going to leave now. You're not going to contact her again. You're not going to drive past her apartment. You're not going to accidentally show up at her gym or her grocery store or anywhere else you've been following her. Adrian went white. I haven't been. Yes, you have. Lucien's voice dropped to something below conversational, forcing Adrian to lean in to hear him clearly. I know about the burner phones, the fake social media accounts, the nights you parked outside her building pretending you were just in the neighborhood. I know because men like you are predictable. And now you're done. Permanently. Because if I see you near her again, if I hear you've texted her, called her, sent her flowers, breathed in her general direction, I will interpret that as a profound disrespect to me personally. Do you understand what happens when people disrespect me personally? Adrian couldn't speak. His throat worked soundlessly, his eyes darting toward the exit like a cornered animal calculating escape routes. That's what I thought, Lucien said pleasantly. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Adrian fled. Literally ran through the restaurant, his shoulder hitting the door frame on the way out with enough force to rattle the glass. The door slammed behind him with conclusive finality. Silence held for 3 seconds. Then the restaurant erupted into a low murmur of resumed conversations, customers suddenly very interested in their entrees again, staff moving with renewed purpose to demonstrate they definitely weren't watching their boss threaten a man with unspecified violence. Lucien turned to Celine. She hadn't moved. Still pressed against the wall, still breathing too fast, still staring at him like he'd just performed an impossibility. Her wrist bore the bright red imprint of Adrian's fingers, already darkening toward purple. Are you hurt? Lucien asked quietly. She shook her head, then nodded, then made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I don't know. Let me see. She extended her arm hesitantly, like she expected him to grab it with the same brutality Adrian had. Instead, Lucien examined the bruising with clinical gentleness, his fingers barely brushing her skin. You need ice, he said, and probably 24 hours off your feet to process whatever chemical cocktail your nervous system is currently drowning in. You're shaking. I'm always shaking lately. The confession came out raw, unfiltered, like something she'd been holding back for months, finally forcing its way through shredded defenses. Every time I see someone who looks like him, every time my phone buzzes, every time I turn around and there's a man behind me. Lucien released her wrist carefully. How long? Since I left him? 3 months? Since he started stalking me? She laughed bitterly. About 3 months and 5 minutes. And tonight's not the first time. No, but it's the last, Lucien said simply. Celine looked up at him with the exhausted skepticism of someone who'd heard promises before. You don't even know me. I know enough. Why? The question came out sharp, defensive. Why do you care? People don't just step in like that unless they want something. Fair question. Lucien had asked himself the same thing approximately 40 times since he'd left his seat. He still didn't have an answer that didn't sound insane, even in his own head. Maybe I'm tired of watching men hurt women in my restaurant, he said instead. This city's full of men hurting women. You're going to get exhausted. Then I'll start with this one. She studied him with sharp intelligence buried under layers of trauma. You're Lucien Moretti. Not a question. An identification with all the appropriate weight attached. I am. I know what you do. She kept her voice low enough that only he could hear, but the accusation carried clearly. I know what you are. Then you know I'm not making empty threats when I tell you Adrian Cross will never touch you again. You're a criminal. Yes. You've killed people. Yes. And you're offering to protect me from my stalker ex-boyfriend because you're terrified and you deserve not to be. The honesty surprised even him. Does it matter beyond that? Celine stared at him for a long time. Outside, winter wind howled against plate glass windows, pushing snow across empty streets in ghostly waves. Inside, warmth and conversation insulated Chicago's wealthy from the cold reality beyond their expensive meals. Finally, she said, I should be afraid of you too. Probably, but I'm not. She sounded almost angry about it. Why aren't I afraid of you? Lucien smiled slightly. Because I'm not the one who hurt you. Yet. Ever. The conviction in his voice made her flinch. Not from fear, from hope. That dangerous, fragile thing that got beaten out of people through sustained cruelty. I need to get back to work, she said quietly. You need to go home. I can't afford to miss shifts. I own this restaurant. Lucien gestured almost imperceptibly toward Carlo, who materialized beside them instantly. Carlo will make sure you're paid for the full evening. Take tomorrow off, too. Paid. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's practicality. You're about 6 minutes from a complete adrenaline crash, and I'd rather you collapse on your own couch than in the middle of dinner service. His tone remained gentle but absolute. Go home, Celine. Sleep if you can. And if Adrian shows up outside your building tonight, call this number. He pulled a card from his jacket, heavy stock, minimalist design, just a phone number in silver embossing, and pressed it into her uninjured hand. She looked at it like it might explode. What happens if I call? Someone will make sure he leaves. And if he doesn't leave? He'll leave. Lucien's voice carried absolute certainty. One way or another. Celine clutched the card, her knuckles white. I don't understand why you're doing this. Neither do I yet, Lucien admitted. But understanding isn't required for action. Go home, Celine. Rest. Tomorrow will make more sense. It wouldn't, but she needed to believe it might. She nodded slowly, still watching him like he was something dangerous pretending to be safe. Which, Lucien supposed, was accurate. Then she grabbed her coat from the back office and disappeared into the freezing Chicago night without looking back. Carlo waited approximately 30 seconds before speaking. Boss, what the fuck was that? A problem being solved. We solve problems with leverage, strategy, controlled violence, not by... Carlo gestured vaguely toward the door. Whatever that white knight bullshit was. Note the ex-boyfriend's full legal name, current address, and employment details, Lucien said calmly, returning to his abandoned whiskey. I want 24-hour surveillance starting now. Every movement, every communication, every breath. If he violates a parking meter too aggressively, I want documentation. Carlo's expression shifted from confusion to comprehension. You're building a file. I'm preparing for inevitability. Men like Adrian Cross don't take rejection well. They especially don't take public humiliation well. He'll try again. Maybe not tonight. Maybe not this week. But he'll try. And when he does, we'll be ready. Carlo finished. What about the girl? What about her? You just inserted yourself into her life pretty dramatically. You've got 3 business meetings tomorrow, a shipment clearing customs Wednesday, and the Calabrese negotiation Friday. You don't have time to play bodyguard to a waitress. Lucian swirled amber liquid thoughtfully. Then it's lucky I employ people whose entire job description is providing security. Boss? Assign 2 men, rotating shifts, discrete distance. She doesn't need to know they're there. Just make sure nothing happens to her. Carlo sighed heavily. You realize every enemy we have is going to notice this eventually. The moment they figure out you care about someone, she becomes a target. Then we make sure they never figure it out. That's not how this works. You can't protect someone from the shadows forever. Eventually I'll deal with it. Lucien finished his drink and stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. For now, make sure Adrian Cross understands tonight's warning wasn't optional. And Carlo? Yeah? If he touches her again, don't wait for my permission. Handle it. Carlo nodded grimly. Understood. Lucien left Belladonna's through the back entrance, his driver already waiting with the engine warm and the street swept for threats. Snow fell heavier now, burying the city under white silence. He should forget about her, should recognize this irrational protective impulse for what it was, a complication his life couldn't afford. He had territories to maintain, rivalries to manage, an empire built on carefully calibrated fear that required constant attention. But somewhere in the space between watching her freeze at the sight of her abuser and seeing the hope die in her eyes when she asked why he cared, something had shifted in Lucian's carefully constructed world. He didn't believe in salvation, didn't believe in heroes, didn't believe in love, but he believed in choice. And for reasons he couldn't articulate, he'd chosen her. The city would bleed because of it. He just didn't know how much yet. Uhos. Celine made it 4 blocks before the shaking got so bad she had to stop and lean against a brick wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps that had nothing to do with the cold. Adrian had found her again. 3 months. 3 months of changing her routines, blocking numbers, varying her routes home, and he'd found her anyway. Just walked into Belladonna's like he had every right. Like the restraining order she couldn't afford to file didn't matter. Like her repeated rejections were negotiating positions instead of boundaries. And she'd frozen. Again. Just like always. The moment his hand clamped around her wrist, every self-defense class, every promise she'd made to herself about being stronger, about never letting another man control her through fear, all of it evaporated. She'd become that trapped, helpless thing again, that version of herself she despised. Until Lucien Moretti stepped between them. Celine pulled out the card he'd given her, studying it under a streetlight's sodium glow. Just a phone number. No name. No explanation. She should throw it away. Should recognize it for what it probably was. A different kind of trap wearing a different kind of smile. Men like Moretti didn't help people out of kindness. They helped because it purchased loyalty. Debt, future leverage. She'd researched him once, after hearing his name whispered around the restaurant. Found enough to understand exactly what kind of protection he was offering. The kind that came with bodies buried in industrial lots. The kind that solved problems permanently but left bloodstains. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart stopped. Then the message loaded. I'm sorry about tonight. I didn't mean to scare you. Can we please just talk? A. Selena's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Another message. I know you're reading this. I can see the typing indicator. Don't ignore me, Celine. That's all you ever do. Ignore me. Dismiss me. Like 3 years meant nothing. She hadn't opened the message, hadn't typed anything, which meant he was lying, manipulating her. Again. The same psychological warfare he'd perfected during their relationship, making her doubt her own perceptions, making her feel guilty for boundaries, making her feel like the problem. A third message. You looked good tonight. I missed seeing you. Did you miss me? Celine's vision blurred. Then, who was that guy? New boyfriend? Already? That didn't take long. Guess you weren't as broken up about us as you pretended. Her thumb hovered over the block button. Answer me. Answer me. You can't hide forever. I know where you work now. She blocked the number with shaking hands. Her phone immediately buzzed again. Different number, same person. Blocking me doesn't make me go away, Celine. When are you going to learn that? She stared at Lucian's card. This was insane. Calling a mob boss because her ex-boyfriend wouldn't leave her alone was insane. Getting involved with someone like Moretti, someone who solved problems with violence, was trading one form of control for another. She'd spent 3 months learning to stand on her own, learning to trust her instincts, learning to rebuild boundaries Adrian had systematically demolished. Calling Lucien Moretti meant surrendering that independence. Her phone buzzed 3 more times in rapid succession. Celine dialed the number. It rang once. "Where are you?" Lucian's voice came through clear and immediate, like he'd been waiting for the call. "How did you know it was me?" "That number forwards directly to me. No one else has it. Where are you, Celine?" "Corner of State and Kinsey. Walking home. He's—" Her voice cracked. "He's texting me. From multiple numbers. I keep blocking them and he just— I need you to walk north on State. Stay on well-lit streets. Don't take shortcuts. My driver will be there in 90 seconds. I don't need— You're 3 blocks from your apartment, which means Adrian knows exactly where you're going to be for the next 8 hours. You're shaking so hard you can barely hold your phone. And you called me, which means some part of you knows you're not safe right now. So you can either wait for my driver or I can come get you personally. Your choice. But make it fast because I'm already in the car." Celine looked around the empty street, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. How dark the gaps between streetlights. How many alleys branched off the main road. 90 seconds, she whispered. "Good girl." The line stayed open. She could hear him breathing, hear the engine in the background, hear Carlo's muffled voice giving directions to the driver. "Lucien? I'm here. Why are you doing this?" Silence stretched for a moment, then, "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." Headlights appeared at the end of the block, a black Mercedes sedan moving with deliberate speed. It pulled up beside her smoothly, the back door opening before the car fully stopped. Lucien sat inside, phone still pressed to his ear, even though she was standing right there. He met her eyes through the open door and said, "Get in, Celine." She hesitated. "He's watching you right now," Lucien said quietly. "From somewhere, somehow. And every second you stand there alone, you're telling him you're vulnerable. So get in the car. Let him see you choose something different." Celine looked at the dark street behind her, at her phone still buzzing with messages from a man who refused to accept her humanity, at the cold, empty walk to an apartment that didn't feel safe anymore. Then she looked at Lucien Moretti, the devil Chicago whispered about in equal parts fear and respect, and made a choice that would change everything. She got in the car. The door closed with expensive finality. "Drive," Lucien said calmly. The Mercedes pulled away from the curb, leaving the frozen street behind. Celine sat rigid against the leather seat, her phone still clutched in white-knuckled hands, her breath fogging the window as Chicago blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. Lucien watched her with the patience of a man who understood trauma's timeline. "Let me see your phone." She handed it over without thinking. He scrolled through the messages, his expression never changing, but his jaw tightened incrementally with each new threat disguised as longing. 14 messages in 6 minutes, he said finally, all from different numbers. He's using a spoofing app. Lucien glanced at his driver. "Marco, I need a tech specialist at the penthouse in 20 minutes. "Boss, she might not want—" Carlo started. "I want," Celine interrupted. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Whatever stops this, I want it." Lucien's eyes met hers. "It'll stop, permanently." The weight behind those words should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in 3 months, Celine Vale felt like she could breathe. The Mercedes turned onto Lakeshore Drive, carrying them both toward decisions that couldn't be unmade and consequences that would drown the city in blood. But that would come later. Right now, there was just the warm car, the quiet city, and the strange, dangerous piece of being next to someone who looked at her fear and decided it was unacceptable. Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. Then he turned to Celine with a question that would haunt everything that followed. "How far are you willing to let me go to make sure he never hurts you again?" Celine stared back at the man who'd inserted himself into her nightmare with brutal efficiency, who commanded respect through violence, who built his empire on fear but somehow made her feel safer than anyone ever had. "How far can you go?" she whispered. Lucian smiled. It was not a kind smile. You'd be surprised. Outside, Chicago glittered with winter stars and hidden threats, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. And somewhere in the darkness, Adrian Cross was sending his 15th unanswered message, completely unaware that he'd just made himself a problem for the wrong man. The city held its breath, waiting for the violence that always followed when Lucien Moretti decided someone needed to disappear. Lucien's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that didn't officially exist on any city registry. The elevator required 2 separate keycards and a thumbprint scan. The windows were bulletproof, the walls were soundproofed, and every entrance had at least 3 armed men stationed within shouting distance. Celine noticed all of it. She stood in the center of the main living space, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking a city that looked almost peaceful from this height, and felt her nervous system finally register what she'd just done. She'd gotten into a car with Chicago's most dangerous criminal, allowed him to bring her to a fortress, put herself completely at his mercy. Her hands started shaking again. "Sit," Lucien said, not unkindly. He gestured toward a leather sofa that probably cost more than her annual salary. "You're going into shock. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar." He moved to a bar cart and poured 2 fingers of something amber into a crystal tumbler. "Drink this." She took the glass automatically, then stared at it like it might be poison. Old survival instincts screaming at her not to accept drinks from men in private spaces. Lucien saw the hesitation. "It's 18-year-old scotch, not Rohypnol, but if it makes you feel better, I'll drink first." He did. Took a slow sip from his own glass without breaking eye contact. Celine drank. The liquid burned going down, but the warmth that followed felt like it might keep her from flying apart. She sank onto the sofa before her knees gave out entirely. Lucien settled into the chair across from her, maintaining careful distance. "The tech specialist will be here in 15 minutes. He's going to trace the numbers Adrian's using, lock down your digital footprint, and set up monitoring on all your accounts. If Adrian tries to access anything, your email, your bank statements, your location data, we'll know immediately." "How much is this going to cost me?" "Nothing. I can't afford nothing. Nothing always costs something eventually." Lucien's mouth curved slightly. "You're smarter than you pretend to be." "I'm a waitress, not an idiot." "I never said you were. But yes, you're right. Nothing costs something eventually. In this case, it costs you accepting help when you need it. That's the price. Can you pay it?" Celine studied him over the rim of her glass. "Why do you care?" "You asked me that already." "You didn't answer." "I did. You just didn't like the answer." Lucien leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "But since we're apparently doing radical honesty tonight, I don't know why I care. I saw a woman being hurt by a man who thought he owned her, and something in my fucked-up criminal brain decided that was unacceptable. That's it. That's the grand explanation. I'm not a good man, Celine. I've done things that would make you sick, but I have rules. And men who hurt women the way Adrian hurts you violate every single one of them." "So this is about your moral code? This is about me deciding you deserve better than being terrorized by a mediocre man with a god complex." The doorbell chimed. 3 short bursts that sounded like a code. Lucien stood smoothly. "That'll be Marcus. He's good at what he does. Doesn't talk much. Doesn't ask questions. You comfortable with him being here?" Celine nodded, too exhausted to do anything else. Marcus turned out to be a wiry man in his 30s, with the pale, caffeine-fueled look of someone who spent most of their life in front of screens. He set up a laptop on the dining table, connected 3 external monitors, and got to work without saying a single word beyond phone. Celine handed over her cell. For 20 minutes, the only sounds in the penthouse were keystrokes and the distant hum of the city below. Lucien made calls in another room, low, clipped conversations in Italian that Celine couldn't follow but understood the tone of. Orders being given, plans being made, consequences being arranged. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Got him." Both Celine and Lucien moved to the table simultaneously. Marcus pointed to a screen filled with data that looked like the Matrix. Your ex is using a VoIP spoofing service based in Eastern Europe. Cheap, common, but sloppy. He's routing everything through his home IP address because he's too stupid to use a VPN. I've got his exact location, his real phone number, his email accounts, and Marcus clicked something. His browser history, which is, concerning. How concerning? Lucian's voice went flat. Marcus turned the monitor so they could see. Rows of search queries filled the screen. How to track someone's location without them knowing. Can you be arrested for following your ex-girlfriend? GPS tracking devices for cars. How to prove someone stole from you is a restraining order, public record. How to find someone's new address. Do phone companies keep deleted text messages? The list went on and on. Months of obsessive searches documenting Adrian's descent into full-blown stalking. Celine felt bile rise in her throat. He's been planning this. Since the day you left him, Marcus confirmed. Maybe before. There's also about 40 social media accounts he's created using fake names. All of them following you, screenshotting your posts. He's got folders on his desktop labeled with your name. Hundreds of photos. Some you posted, some that look like he took them himself from a distance. Jesus Christ. Celine's voice came out broken. Lucien's expression hadn't changed, but his hands curled into fists. Can you lock him out of everything? Already done. Changed all her passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, flagged his IP addresses across every platform. He tries to access anything related to her, I'll get an alert. Marcus pulled up another window. But boss, you need to see this. It was a forum. Some dark corner of the internet where rejected men gathered to commiserate and radicalize each other. Adrian had been active for weeks, posting under a username, sharing details about Celine, where she worked, what she looked like, how she'd destroyed his life. The responses were vile. Other men encouraging him to reclaim what's his, sharing tactics, reinforcing the delusion that women were property that needed to be controlled. One post from Adrian dated 2 days ago. She thinks she can just move on like I don't exist. Like 3 years meant nothing. I'm going to remind her. I'm going to make her understand that we're not finished. We'll never be finished. Celine couldn't breathe. The room tilted sideways, her vision tunneling to pinpricks. Lucien's hand landed on her shoulder, steady, grounding. Marcus, I need everything. Every post, every photo, every search, documentation that would stand up in court. And I need it yesterday. Already compiling, I'll have a full report by morning. Marcus started packing up his equipment. One more thing. He's been researching you too, boss. Started about 6 hours ago, after the restaurant. He knows who you are, knows what you do, and he's looking for ways to... Marcus hesitated. To what? Lucian's voice could have cut steel. To hurt you through her. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Marcus finished packing quickly. I'll see myself out. Call if you need anything else. He disappeared through the elevator, leaving Celine and Lucian alone with the documentation of Adrian's madness spread across multiple screens. Celine stood abruptly, the sudden movement making her dizzy. I need to leave Chicago. No. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Lucian's voice remained calm. You're thinking if you run he can't find you. But men like Adrian don't stop because geography changes. They follow. They obsess. They escalate. Running doesn't solve this. It just delays the inevitable. Then what does solve it? Celine spun to face him, anger finally breaking through the fear. Because from where I'm standing, my options are get murdered by my psychotic ex or get indebted to a crime lord who'll probably own me in a different way. Those are both losing scenarios. I don't want to own you. Then what do you want? I want you to stop shaking every time your phone buzzes. The words came out harder than Lucian intended. He took a breath, moderating his tone. I want you to walk down a street without calculating escape routes. I want you to sleep through the night without wondering if he's outside your window. That's what I want, Celine. For you to exist without fear. Is that so fucking incomprehensible? From you? Yes. She laughed bitterly. You're Lucien Moretti. You built an empire on fear. Your entire existence is about making people afraid. So forgive me if I don't immediately trust the sudden humanitarian impulse. Then don't trust it. Use it. Lucian closed the distance between them in 2 strides. I'm offering you something Adrian never gave you. A choice. You can walk out of here right now. Take the security protocols Marcus set up and handle this yourself. Or you can stay. Accept my protection. Let me deal with Adrian the way I deal with all problems that threaten things I've decided matter. But it's your decision, not mine. Not Adrian's, yours. Celine stared up at him, her chest heaving. And if I stay? What does that cost me? Your fear. Lucian's voice dropped to something rawer. That's the only price. You stop being afraid. You stop looking over your shoulder. You stop making yourself smaller to avoid making him angry. That's what it costs. Can you afford it? She wanted to say no. Wanted to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to build. Wanted to believe she could handle this without becoming another possession in a powerful man's collection. But her phone buzzed in Marcus's abandoned equipment. 3 times. Rapid succession. Different numbers. Same person. Celine closed her eyes. How do you make him stop? Do you really want to know? No. The admission came out quiet. But I need to know what I'm agreeing to. Lucian considered her for a long moment. Then he walked to the windows overlooking Chicago's glittering sprawl. I'm going to have him watched, every movement documented, every pattern memorized, and the next time he violates your boundaries, the next time he shows up somewhere he shouldn't be, sends a message he shouldn't send, breathes in your direction when he's been told not to, my men are going to have a conversation with him, a thorough one, the kind that makes sure he understands consequences in ways words never could. Trust me, but You mean you're going to hurt him? I mean I'm going to ensure he never has the capacity to hurt you again. How hurt he gets in the process depends entirely on how quickly he learns the lesson. Celine should have been horrified, should have recognized this for what it was, violence being offered like a gift. But instead, all she felt was tired. So devastatingly tired of being afraid, of being hunted, of existing in a constant state of hypervigilance because one man refused to accept rejection. What if he doesn't learn? She asked quietly. Lucien turned from the window. Then the lesson becomes permanent. You'd kill him. If necessary. That's insane. That's effective. Lucien's expression remained neutral. I'm not asking you to like it, Celine. I'm asking if you can live with it. There's a difference. I don't know. Her voice cracked. I don't know what I can live with anymore. 3 months ago, I thought I could live with Adrian's jealousy, his need to know where I was every second, the way he read my texts and questioned my friendships and slowly erased every part of my life that didn't include him. I thought that was love. I thought I was being difficult by wanting space. And then one night he put his hands around my throat because I came home 20 minutes late from the grocery store, and I realized I'd been living in a prison disguised as a relationship. She was crying now, not sobbing, just tears sliding down her face with the inevitability of something held back too long. I left him. I fucking left him. I changed my number, moved apartments, started over. I did everything right, and he still found me. He still won't let me go. So you tell me, Lucien, what can I live with? Because apparently I can't even live with trying to be free. Lucien crossed back to her, his movements deliberate and slow. He didn't touch her, didn't invade her space, just stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the solid presence of someone who wasn't going anywhere. You're not living with him, Lucien said quietly. You're living with the aftermath of him. There's a difference. And the aftermath ends when he does. Either he stops or he stops breathing. Those are the only 2 outcomes. So I'm asking you right now, while you're still sober enough to make the choice clearly, how far are you willing to let me go? Celine wiped her face roughly. If I say yes to this, if I let you handle Adrian the way you're suggesting, I become someone different, someone who solves problems with violence. No, you become someone who survives. There's nothing wrong with that. My therapist would disagree. Your therapist isn't being stalked by a man with homicidal ideation patterns documented across multiple platforms. Fair point. Celine took a shaky breath. I need time to think. You have until morning. After that, Adrian's pattern suggests he'll escalate. He always does when you reject him. The restaurant was public. Witnesses everywhere. Next time will be private. Less visibility. More control. He's going to try to get you alone, Celine, and when he does, you need to decide if you want my men there to stop him or if you want to handle it yourself. That's not fair. No. It's not, but it's real. And I don't have the luxury of lying to you about how dangerous this is. Celine nodded slowly. Her phone buzzed again. She flinched. Lucien picked up the device, glanced at the screen, and his expression went arctic. He's outside your apartment. What? Adrian, he's texting you photos of your front door, time-stamped 4 minutes ago. The bottom dropped out of Celine's world. He can't be. I'm here. He doesn't know you're here, but he knows you're not home, which means he's been watching your apartment long enough to notice you haven't returned. Lucien was already moving, pulling his phone out, rapid-firing texts. Marco, I need units at the Kinsey Street address, now. Visual confirmation on a white male, approximately 6 foot, blonde, business casual. Do not engage, just watch. He turned back to Celine. You're staying here tonight. I can't. You can. You will. Your apartment is compromised. He knows where you live. He's willing to show up there unannounced. That makes it unsafe. My men will sweep the building, check for any surveillance devices he might have planted, and secure the perimeter. But you're not going back there until I'm certain he can't access it. This is insane. You're making decisions for me. I'm keeping you alive. Lucien's voice cut through her rising panic. And if that means making decisions you're too scared to make yourself, then yes, I'm doing that. You can be angry about it later. Right now, you're going to accept that your ex-boyfriend is dangerous, that you're not equipped to handle him alone, and that pride is significantly less important than survival. Celine wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the independence she'd barely started rebuilding, but her phone lit up with another photo. Closer this time. Adrian's hand on her apartment door handle, testing it. He's trying to get inside, she whispered. Lucien's phone rang. He answered immediately. Talk to me. Marco's voice came through on speaker. We've got visual. Subject matches description. He's attempting to access the apartment through the front door. No success. Now he's circling to the fire escape. Stop him. Boss, you said not to engage. I changed my mind. Stop him. Non-violently if possible, but stop him. A pause. Then, copy that. Lucien ended the call. My men are handling it. What does handling mean? It means they're going to make it very clear that your apartment is under surveillance and any further attempts to access it will result in police involvement. And since Adrian's pattern suggests he's conflict-averse when confronted by multiple men, he'll probably back down. And if he doesn't, then they'll make the threat more tangible. Celine sank back onto the sofa, her entire body vibrating with adrenaline she had no outlet for. This is my life now. This is what I'm living with. For tonight, yes, but not forever. Lucien poured her another drink, pressed it into her hands. Drink, breathe, and let me handle this. I hate this. I know. I hate that I need you. I know that too. I hate that the only person who makes me feel safe is someone everyone else is terrified of. Lucien smiled without humor. That's called irony. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Celine drank. The scotch didn't help, but it gave her something to do with her hands. What happens now? Now you sleep. Guest room is down the hall. Bathroom stocked. Clothes in the closet that might fit you. Tomorrow we'll reassess. I have a shift tomorrow. Call in sick. I can't afford a swole. I'll cover your wages. And before you argue, consider it hazard pay for putting up with Adrian's bullshit without adequate protection. You can't just throw money at every problem. Watch me. Celine laughed despite herself. It came out slightly hysterical. You're insane. And you're exhausted. Go to bed, Celine. We'll fight about my methodology in the morning. She should have refused. Should have maintained some semblance of control over her own life. But the weight of the last 6 hours, Adrian showing up, Lucien intervening, the ride here, Marcus's documentation, the photos of her apartment, all of it crashed down at once. She was so tired, so devastatingly tired of being strong alone. Which room? She asked quietly. Lucien pointed. Second door on the left. Lock it if it makes you feel better. No one will disturb you. Celine stood on shaking legs. She made it 3 steps before turning back. Lucien? Yeah? Thank you. For tonight. She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate everything. Just thank you. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Get some sleep. She disappeared down the hallway, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Lucien stood alone in the living room, Chicago sprawling beneath him like an organism made of light and shadow. His phone buzzed. Marco's update. Subject retreated. Won't be back tonight. We've got eyes on his apartment and his car. He moves, we know. Good. But not good enough. Lucien dialed Carlo. Boss, it's 1 a.m. I need everything we have on Adrian Cross. Employment history, financial records, known associates, where he drinks, where he buys groceries, every pattern, every routine, every vulnerability, and I need it before sunrise. Jesus, what did he do? He made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't follow through. Silence. Then, you're going after him. I'm ensuring he understands consequences. Boss, if we move too fast, if we move too slow, he tries again. And next time, maybe my men aren't close enough. Maybe he has a weapon. Maybe Celine ends up in a hospital or a morgue because I decided to be patient. I'm not making that gamble, Carlo, so get me everything, tonight. Understood. Lucien ended the call and poured himself another drink. The scotch tasted like ash. Everything tasted like ash lately, except the brief moments when Celine looked at him like he was something other than what he was. He shouldn't care this much. Shouldn't have inserted himself into her nightmare with such totality. Should recognize this protective instinct for what it was, a complication his carefully balanced life couldn't afford. But somewhere between watching her freeze at the sight of her abuser and seeing the hope struggle back to life in her eyes when he'd asked her to trust him, Lucien Moretti had made a decision. Adrian Cross was going to disappear. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. Because there were 2 ways to solve problems in Lucien's world, strategically or permanently, and Adrian had just escalated past strategy. Celine woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For exactly 3 seconds, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The restaurant, Adrian, Lucien, the ride here, the photos, all of it cascading through her consciousness like a waking nightmare. She was in Lucien Moretti's penthouse. She'd spent the night in a crime lord's guest room. Her ex-boyfriend was stalking her with documented obsessive intent. And somewhere in this pristine, dangerous space, the man who'd offered to make her problems disappear was probably awake and planning God knew what. Celine dragged herself out of bed. The clothes in the closet fit surprisingly well, designer labels she recognized from magazines but would never buy herself. She settled for black jeans and a soft sweater, avoiding anything too expensive looking. When she emerged into the main living area, Lucien was standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian to someone who kept interrupting. He wore a different suit from last night, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind that probably cost more than her car. He noticed her immediately, held up one finger, and finished his conversation with 3 clipped words that sounded like threats. "Coffee's fresh," he said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "And there's breakfast if you're hungry. Carlo brought food earlier." "What time is it?" 8:30. "I slept for 7 hours." Celine sounded surprised even to herself. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours consecutively. "Your body finally felt safe enough to shut down properly. Trauma does that." Lucien poured coffee into an expensive-looking mug and handed it to her. "How do you feel?" "Disoriented, confused, angry?" She took the coffee gratefully. "Grateful. I'm cycling through them all pretty rapidly." "That's normal." "Speaking from experience?" "Something like that." They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the morning light making everything feel less dangerous and more real simultaneously. Finally, Celine asked, "What happened last night? After I went to bed?" "My men confirmed Adrian left your building around 1:15. They followed him home. He hasn't left his apartment since. We've got surveillance on all his exit points." "So you're watching him?" 24/7. That's... Celine struggled for the right word. Intense. "That's necessary. He's not going to stop, Celine. Men like him don't. They escalate until someone makes them stop. I'm going to be that someone." "By doing what exactly?" Lucien set his own coffee down. "Do you really want the details? I need to know what I'm part of." "You're not part of anything. This is my decision, my action, my consequences." "Don't do that. Don't make unilateral choices about my life and pretend it's to protect me from guilt. If something's going to happen to Adrian because of me, not because of you, because of him. He made the choice to stalk you, to terrorize you, to violate every boundary you set. He created this situation. I'm just resolving it. With violence, if necessary. It's always necessary in your world, isn't it? Celine's voice rose slightly. Everything gets solved with threats and intimidation and men with guns. Yes. Lucian's brutal honesty cut through her rising anger. Because pretty words and restraining orders don't stop men like Adrian. The legal system is designed to protect him until he actually hurts you, and by then, it's too late. So yes, I solve problems with violence. It's effective, it's permanent, and it keeps people I care about alive. You barely know me. I know enough. That's not an answer. Then what answer do you want? Lucian's composure finally cracked slightly. You want me to explain why watching you freeze in fear made something in my chest feel wrong? Why seeing his hand on your wrist made me want to break every bone in his body? Why the thought of him hurting you makes me capable of things I've spent years trying to avoid? I don't have a rational explanation, Celine. I just know that since you walked into my line of sight, I've decided you're worth protecting. And I protect what's mine very thoroughly. I'm not yours. Then consider yourself borrowed. That's not better. I didn't say it was better. I said it was honest. Celine's phone rang, cutting through the tension. Unknown number. She stared at it like it might explode. Lucien crossed the space between them in 2 strides. Answer it. Speakerphone. Let me hear him. She did, her hand shaking slightly. Hello? Celine. Adrian's voice came through syrupy and poisonous. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. You have plenty to say. You're just too scared to say it. He laughed softly. I saw you last night, getting into that car, with him. Already moving on. That was fast, baby. 3 months and you're already fucking someone else? Lucian's expression went glacial, but he stayed silent, listening. I'm not doing this, Celine said, her voice steadier than she felt. Yes, you are. Because I'm not going away, Celine. You understand that, right? I'm never going away. You're mine. You've always been mine. And whatever you think that mobster can give you, stop calling me. I can give you better. I loved you. I still love you. He's just using you. Can't you see that? Men like him don't love. They possess. They control. They… Like you? The words burst out before Celine could stop them. Men like him control? You monitored every text message. You demanded access to my email. You isolated me from my friends. You put your hands around my throat because I forgot to text you I'd be late. Don't lecture me about control, Adrian. You wrote the fucking manual. Silence on the other end. Then his voice changed, dropped into something colder. You're going to regret saying that. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You think he can protect you? He can't. Nobody can. I know where you work. I know where you live. I know your patterns, your routines, everything. And sooner or later, you're going to be alone. And when you are… Lucian took the phone from her hand gently. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen fire. Adrian Cross. That is your name, correct? Dead silence. I'm going to make this very simple for you. You're going to stop calling Celine. You're going to stop texting her. You're going to stop driving past her apartment. You're going to stop existing in her awareness entirely. And if you don't, if I see you within 500 feet of her, if I find one more text message, one more photo, one more piece of evidence that you violated this very clear boundary, I'm going to do something that cannot be undone. Do you understand me? Who the fuck do you think? I think I'm the man who's decided your behavior is unacceptable. I think I'm the man with the resources to make you disappear so completely your own mother won't find the body. I think I'm the man currently looking at documentation of every illegal search you've performed, every stalking incident you've perpetrated, every threatening message you've sent. And I think I'm the man who's given you one chance to walk away intact. This is that chance, Adrian. Take it, because there won't be another. You can't. I can. I will. Test me. Lucian ended the call and handed the phone back to Celine. He'll try again. Probably not directly. He'll use friends, proxies, fake accounts, but he'll try. Men like him always do. So what now? Now we wait and watch, and the moment he violates the boundary again, Lucian's smile didn't reach his eyes. We have a conversation with him, a thorough one. Celine should have been terrified of how calm he sounded while discussing violence, should have recognized the danger of aligning herself with someone who solved problems this way. Instead, all she felt was relief. Someone else was carrying the weight of her fear, someone stronger, someone who didn't flinch when Adrian pushed back. It should have felt like weakness. It felt like breathing. I need to call work, she said quietly. Let them know I'm not coming in. Already handled. I called the manager this morning, told him you were sick. He's covering your shifts through the weekend. You can't just, I can. I did. And before you argue, consider that showing up at work right now makes you a target. Adrian knows where you work. He'll come back. So you're taking 3 days off, paid. And after that, we'll reassess based on whether he's still breathing. The casual way Lucien referenced killing someone should have horrified her. It didn't. That realization changed everything. Because Celine finally understood the difference between being possessed and being protected. Adrian's love had demanded surrender, had required her to become smaller, quieter, more compliant until there was nothing left of her except the parts he approved of. Lucien's protection demanded nothing except that she survive. And somewhere in the space between those two truths, Celine Vale made a choice that would stain her soul but save her life. She stopped fighting. Okay, she whispered. Okay, what? Okay, I'll stay. 3 days. Let you handle this. And if Adrian... She swallowed hard. If something permanent needs to happen, I won't ask questions about it afterward. Lucian studied her carefully. You understand what you're saying? I'm saying I want to live without fear more than I want to pretend I'm not complicit in whatever keeps me safe. That's a dangerous admission. This is a dangerous situation. Yes, it is. Lucien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. And for what it's worth, I'll do everything I can to avoid permanent solutions. But if it comes to that, you won't carry the weight alone. That's my promise. Celine nodded, not trusting her voice. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. You made a mistake, Celine, a big one. But don't worry, I forgive you. I always forgive you. See you soon. She showed it to Lucien without comment. His jaw tightened incrementally. Then he made a call. Carlo, new plan. I want Adrian Cross picked up tonight, quietly. No witnesses. Bring him to the warehouse on Ashland. I'm going to have that conversation we discussed earlier. He ended the call and looked at Celine. Last chance to tell me this is too far. She thought about 3 months of looking over her shoulder, of jumping at shadows, of the constant, grinding fear that Adrian would eventually corner her somewhere private, somewhere final. Then she thought about the photos on his computer, the obsessive searches, the forum posts where he documented his plans to reclaim her. It's not too far, she said quietly. Lucien nodded once. Then tonight, Adrian Cross stops being your problem, one way or another. Outside, Chicago hummed with morning traffic and the illusion of normalcy. Inside the penthouse, 2 people who shouldn't have found each other made a pact that would stain them both. But in the moment, it felt like survival. And survival, Celine was learning, rarely came clean. The city held its breath, waiting for the violence that always followed when Lucien Moretti decided someone had become a problem requiring permanent solutions. Adrian Cross had 48 hours left to live. He just didn't know it yet. The warehouse on Ashland Avenue existed in the kind of industrial no man's land where Chicago's legitimate economy ended and its shadow version began. Concrete floors stained with decades of oil and rust. Metal rafters that groaned in winter wind. No windows. No neighbors. No witnesses. Lucien arrived at 11 p.m. with Carlo and 3 men whose names Celine had never learned and didn't want to know. She'd insisted on coming despite every argument Lucien made against it. This was her nightmare. Her stalker. Her choice to let Lucien handle it this way. She needed to see what that choice looked like in practice. The drive from the penthouse had been silent except for the hum of tires on wet pavement and the occasional burst of radio chatter from Carlo's phone, coded updates, confirmations, the machinery of organized crime moving with practiced efficiency. Adrian was already there when they arrived. Celine saw him through the open warehouse door, tied to a metal chair bolted to the floor, his face puffy and bloodied from what looked like minimal resistance during pickup. His designer shirt was torn. His expensive watch was missing. He looked smaller than she remembered, less threatening. Just a man who'd built his entire identity on controlling someone weaker and was now discovering what real power looked like. He saw her immediately. His eyes went wide with something between hope and accusation. "Celine, thank God! Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we can work this out." "She's not here to save you," Lucian said quietly, stepping into the warehouse with the unhurried grace of someone completely in control. "She's here to watch you understand consequences." Adrian's expression twisted. "You bitch! You fucking bitch! You did this! You brought them—" One of Lucian's men backhanded him casually. Not hard enough to do permanent damage, just enough to reestablish the power dynamic. Celine flinched but didn't look away. Lucien gestured toward a metal table where someone had laid out Adrian's phone, his laptop, and printed documentation of every stalking incident Marcus had compiled. Adrian Cross, 34 years old, financial consultant at Morrison & Bright, lives alone in a Lincoln Park condo his parents helped purchase. No criminal record, no history of violence that left marks visible enough to photograph. He picked up one of the printed pages. But plenty of history that didn't. 3 previous relationships that ended with restraining orders filed and then mysteriously dropped. A pattern of obsessive behavior documented across multiple platforms, and specifically regarding Celine Vale. Lucian's voice went flat. Approximately 400 hours of documented stalking over 90 days. That's not... I wasn't stalking. I was just... Adrian's voice cracked. I love her. I was trying to fix what she broke. She didn't break anything. She left. That's not the same thing. She's mine. Adrian lunged against the restraints, the chair bolting to the floor, keeping him from going anywhere. 3 years. 3 years I invested in her. Made her better. Made her someone worth knowing. And she just walked away like none of it mattered. "Because none of it mattered to you," Celine heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I wasn't a person to you, Adrian. I was a project. Something you could fix and mold and control until I fit whatever version you'd decided I should be. I gave you everything. You gave me a cage and called it love. I protected you. You isolated me from everyone who actually cared about me. Because they were pulling you away from us." Adrian's face flushed red, spit flying. "Your friends, your family, they were poisoning you against me, making you think you deserved better. But you don't, Celine. You really don't. You're nothing special, nothing remarkable. I'm the one who saw potential in you when everyone else saw a mediocre waitress with delusions of being an artist." Lucien moved so fast Celine almost missed it. One moment he was standing by the table. The next, his hand was wrapped around Adrian's throat, squeezing just hard enough to cut off air without crushing anything vital. "Here's what's going to happen," Lucian said conversationally, like he was discussing dinner plans instead of strangulation. "You're going to stop talking about Celine like she's property you lost. You're going to stop texting her, stop calling her, stop driving past her apartment at 2 in the morning taking photos. You're going to delete every file, every photo, every piece of information you've collected about her. And then you're going to leave Chicago, tonight. You're going to request a transfer to your company's New York office, which I know exists because I checked. And you're going to start a new life somewhere far away from here. Do you understand me?" Adrian's face was turning purple. He nodded frantically. Lucien released him. Adrian gasped, sucking in air with desperate wheezing sounds. "And if you don't?" Lucien continued calmly. "If I find out you're still in Chicago after sunrise? If I discover you've contacted Celine through any means whatsoever? If you've told anyone about this conversation?" He leaned in close, his voice dropping to something below hearing range for everyone except Adrian. "I will make you disappear so completely that forensic teams won't find enough DNA to confirm you ever existed. That's not a threat. That's observable fact. I've done it before. I'll do it again. You are not special. You are not important. You are a problem that can be solved in approximately 45 minutes with the right tools. So, do we have an understanding?" Adrian nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, I'll leave. I'll go. I'll never contact her again." "Good. Lucien straightened, adjusting his cuffs like he'd just finished a business meeting. Carlo, get him cleaned up. Put him in a car with 2 of our men. Make sure he's on a plane to New York by morning, and he glanced at Adrian with clinical detachment. If he gives you any problems, feel free to make the lesson more memorable. Carlo nodded. 2 men moved forward to cut Adrian's restraints. It should have been over. Should have been the clean ending where the monster got put in his place, and the victim got her life back, and everyone moved forward scarred but surviving. Then Adrian laughed. Not a normal laugh. Something broken and manic and completely wrong. The kind of laugh that meant someone had already lost everything and decided to burn the rest down on principle. You think you won? Adrian stood on shaking legs, supported by Lucien's men, his face a wreck of bruises and tears, and something else underneath, something calculating. You think this ends with me getting on a plane, you stupid fuck? You have no idea what you just stepped into. Lucien's expression didn't change. Explain. Celine. Adrian's smile was all blood and shattered teeth. Tell him. Tell him why you really left me. Tell him the real reason you ran. Celine's blood turned to ice. Adrian, don't. Tell him about the money. Silence crashed down like physical weight. Lucien turned to Celine slowly. What money? It's not. He's lying. $75,000, Adrian said, his voice gaining strength from her panic. Stolen from my accounts over 6 months. Small withdrawals, careful, calculated. I didn't even notice until after she left. Then I pulled the statements and... He laughed again. That broken sound that made Celine's skin crawl. There it was. Every time I gave her my credit card, every time she had access to my laptop, every time I trusted her with passwords, she was robbing me blind. That's not what happened. Celine's voice came out strangled. Then what did happen? Lucien's tone was perfectly neutral, which somehow made it worse. Explain it to me, Celine. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The warehouse walls were closing in. He gave me that money? Like hell I did. You told me to buy things. You insisted I use your accounts because mine weren't good enough. Because I was broke and pathetic and you wanted to take care of me. For groceries, for dinner, not for $75,000 in cash withdrawals and transfers to offshore accounts I've never heard of. Adrian looked at Lucien with desperate vindication. You want to know why I was following her? Because she's a thief. Because she destroyed 3 years of my life and stole my money, and I was trying to get it back before she disappeared completely. That's why I couldn't let her go. Not because I'm obsessed, because she's a criminal. You're lying. But Celine's voice cracked on the words. Am I? Then why can't you look at him right now? Lucien's silence was deafening. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on Celine with the cold assessment of someone recalculating everything. Boss, Carlo started. Quiet. Lucien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He crossed the space to Celine in 3 strides, stopping just close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. Tell me the truth, right now. Did you steal from him? It wasn't stealing. Did you take his money? Celine's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. Yes, but not the way he's making it sound. How much? I don't know exactly. Guess. Maybe 60,000, $73,412, Adrian supplied helpfully. I have the statements in my car, transaction by transaction. I can show you. Lucien held up one hand without looking at Adrian. His eyes never left Celine's face. Why? Because I needed to leave. The words burst out of her like something that had been festering for months. Because I had no money of my own. Because he controlled every dollar I made. Because I couldn't even buy coffee without explaining where I'd been and who I'd talked to and why I needed caffeine. Because I was drowning in a relationship that was killing me piece by piece, and the only way out was money I didn't have. So you stole it. I survived. Tears were streaming down her face now. I survived the only way I could. He monitored my bank account. He questioned every purchase. I couldn't save money without him noticing. So yes, I took his money. I took it carefully over 6 months, small amounts he wouldn't notice, and I built an escape fund. And when I finally left, I used that money to put 3 security deposits down on apartments before I found one that would take me without employment verification. I used it to buy a new phone he couldn't track, I used it to survive for 2 months while I found work that didn't require references he could poison. I used it to not end up homeless or dead or trapped in that apartment with his hands around my throat again. So yes, Lucian, I stole from him, and I'd do it again, because it saved my life. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Adrian. Is that accurate? You controlled her finances? Adrian hesitated. I helped her manage money. She was terrible at budgeting. Did you give her access to her own earnings? She didn't earn anything worth managing. Waitressing tips, pocket change. I paid for everything that mattered. Did she have her own bank account? Yes, but could she access it without your knowledge? I had login credentials for oversight purposes. So no. Lucian's voice went arctic. She couldn't access her own money without you watching. That's not... I was protecting her from bad financial decisions. You were financially abusing her. Lucien said it like he was identifying a species of insect, clinical, disgusted. Which means the money she took wasn't theft. It was reparations. Adrian's face contorted with rage. That's bullshit. She signed documents agreeing to joint financial management. Under duress. Under love. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Lucian turned back to Celine. You should have told me. I know. Before we got here. Before I threatened to make him disappear. You should have told me there was more to this story than stalking. Would it have changed anything? Celine's voice came out raw. Would you have helped me if you knew I'd stolen from him? Or would you have decided I deserved whatever he did to me? Fair question. Lucian didn't have an immediate answer. Carlo cleared his throat carefully. Boss, if there's money involved, if this is more complicated than we thought. It's not more complicated. It's exactly as complicated as it always was. Lucian's jaw tightened incrementally. A man financially abused his partner. She escaped using the only resources available. He's been stalking her ever since under the pretense of recovering stolen property. That's not complicated. That's textbook. But the money isn't the point. The point is whether she's safe. And clearly she's not, because Adrian here has been using financial leverage to justify stalking for 3 months. Lucian looked at Adrian with something close to contempt. You didn't call the police, didn't report the theft, didn't pursue legal remedies. You just stalked her, terrorized her, made her life hell. Why? Adrian's expression shifted through several emotions before landing on something ugly. Because she needed to learn. Learn what? That she can't just... He gestured wildly, the restraints gone but the damage to his pride permanent. That she can't just leave. That relationships don't work that way. That you don't get to destroy someone's life and walk away clean. I wanted her to understand what she'd done, how she'd hurt me. I wanted her to come back and apologize and what? You'd forgive her? Take her back? Continue abusing her? Lucian's voice could have cut glass. You didn't want the money back, Adrian. You wanted control back. The $70,000 is just the excuse you're using to justify refusing to let her go. That's not true. Then file a police report, right now. I'll drive you to the station myself. We'll let the legal system sort out whether her actions constitute theft or survival. Lucian pulled out his phone, or we can acknowledge that you don't actually want legal resolution. You want her punished, scared, returned to you with her spirit broken enough that she never tries to leave again. Which is it? Adrian stared at him with impotent rage. You think you're better than me? You're a criminal, a murderer. You've done things that make financial oversight look like fucking charity work. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. Lucian's voice remained calm, implacable. But you pretend your abuse is love. Your control is care. Your stalking is justified because she took money you were already using to trap her. So no, Adrian, I don't think I'm better than you. I know I am, because at least I'm honest about being a monster. He turned to Carlo. Get him out of here. Put him on the plane to New York like we discussed. And if he resists... Lucien's smile didn't reach his eyes. Make it hurt. Carlo nodded, gesturing to the other men. They grabbed Adrian, who started struggling immediately. This isn't over, Adrian screamed as they dragged him toward the door. You think you can just... She's a thief. Everyone needs to know. I'll tell everyone. Your enemies, your business partners. I'll make sure the whole city knows Lucian Moretti is protecting a criminal. One of the men hit him. hard enough that the screaming stopped. Then they were gone, the warehouse door slamming shut with conclusive finality, leaving Celine and Lucien alone in the cavernous space with fluorescent lights humming overhead and her entire world falling apart. Lucien stood with his back to her for a long moment, just breathing, just thinking. The silence stretched until Celine couldn't bear it anymore. "Say something," she whispered. "What do you want me to say? Tell me you understand why I did it." "I understand." He turned slowly. His expression was carefully neutral. "I understand you were trapped. I understand you did what you had to do to survive. I understand the money wasn't the point, but Celine," his voice dropped to something harder, "you lied to me. I didn't, by omission. You let me threaten him. You let me bring him here. You let me plan things I can't take back. And you never mentioned that he had legitimate grievance." "It's not legitimate." "Legally, it is. Morally, ethically, practically, no. But legally, you took money that wasn't yours without permission. That's theft, no matter how justified, and that changes the equation." "How?" Celine's voice rose defensively. "How does it change anything? He was still abusing me. He's still stalking me. The money doesn't erase that. The money gives him a story that plays in court. It gives him sympathetic coverage. It makes you look like the villain and him the victim. And worse," Lucian's jaw tightened, "it makes me look like a fool who inserted himself into a domestic dispute without understanding the full picture." "Is that what you care about? How you look?" "I care about the fact that every enemy I have is going to hear about this. About how Lucien Moretti threatened a civilian over a woman who robbed him. About how I've gone soft. About how I can be manipulated through the right leverage." He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of frustration breaking through his composure. "You made me vulnerable, Celine. You made me care about protecting you without giving me the information I needed to do it intelligently. And now Adrian's going to tell everyone. Every rival organization, every ambitious lieutenant looking for weakness. They're all going to know I have a blind spot. And that blind spot is you, Tis." The words hit like physical blows. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying this got more complicated than either of us anticipated." "Complicated how?" Lucian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression changed, hardened. "Carlo just confirmed Adrian's already made calls from the car, to people I'd rather he didn't have contact with." "What people?" "The Calabrese family." Celine recognized the name from whispered conversations at Belladonna's, one of Chicago's rival organizations, the kind of people you didn't mention out loud if you valued your continued existence. Why would he call them? "Because Adrian Cross isn't as stupid as he looks." Lucien's voice went flat. "He's selling information about you, about me, about the fact that I threatened him over a woman who stole money, and the Calabrese family is going to use that information exactly the way I would if someone handed me leverage against my enemies. They're going to come after me. They're going to come after us. You became my weakness the moment I defended you, and now everyone knows it." Celine's legs gave out. She sank onto a concrete step, her head in her hands. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have—" "Yes, you should have." Lucien's tone wasn't angry, just tired. "But you didn't. And now we both have to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" His phone buzzed again, then again. A rapid-fire series of messages that made his expression progressively darker. Finally, he looked up. "Carlo says the Calabrese family wants a meeting, tonight. They're calling it a conversation about mutual interests, which means they want to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "You." Lucien said it flatly. "They want me to hand you over. Let them deal with the theft situation their way. In exchange, they'll forget about the Adrian Cross incident. No loss of face for me. No war over a woman. Clean resolution." Celine's blood turned to ice. "And if you refuse?" "Then they interpret my protection of you as a declaration that you're worth fighting over, which means war, which means bodies, which means the tentative peace I've spent 3 years building dissolves because I decided one woman mattered more than stability." The warehouse felt like it was closing in. "So you're going to give me to them?" "I didn't say that." "But you're considering it." Lucien met her eyes directly. "I'm considering every option. That's what I do. I calculate costs, assess risks. Determine what I can afford to lose. He crossed the space between them, crouching so they were eye level. Tell me honestly, Celine. Knowing what this costs, knowing that people will die because I chose to protect you, would you make the same choice? Would you still let me threaten Adrian if you knew it would start a war? She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to be that person who valued her own survival above everything else. But she thought about Carlo, about Marco, about the men who'd been watching her apartment, protecting her, risking themselves because Lucien had decided she mattered. She thought about bodies in warehouses, about families getting notification calls, about the cascade of violence that followed when powerful men decided something was worth fighting over. I don't know, she whispered. That's the most honest thing you've said all night. Lucien stood, pulling out his phone. I have 2 hours to decide what you're worth, what I'm willing to sacrifice to keep you safe, what I'm willing to risk to prove I don't hand over people under my protection just because someone demands it. Lucien, go back to the penthouse. Carlo will drive you. Lock yourself in the guest room. Don't answer the door for anyone except me. And Celine? He looked at her with something close to regret. Start thinking about what happens if the answer is, I can't protect you. Because if the Calabrese family pushes hard enough, if they make this about respect and territory and all the things men like me kill over, I might have to make a choice between you and everything I've built. And I honestly don't know which one I'll pick. The words gutted her. You'd really hand me over? I'd really consider it. His honesty was brutal. Because the alternative is war. And war means dozens of people dying. My people, their people. Civilians caught in crossfire. All because I decided one woman who lied to me was worth burning the city down. So yes, Celine. I'm considering every option, including the one where you disappear quietly and I maintain the empire that keeps hundreds of people fed and protected and alive. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's real. And you need to understand that decisions have costs. He gestured toward the door. Carlo's waiting. Go. Celine stood on shaking legs. And if you decide I'm not worth it, what happens to me? I'll make sure you're safe. Different city, different identity. Enough money to start over somewhere far from here. Just not here. Just not here. She should have argued, should have fought, should have reminded him that he'd promised to protect her. But promises meant nothing when empires were at stake. She understood that now. So she walked toward the door on legs that barely supported her weight, past the table where Adrian's laptop still sat open with her crimes documented in spreadsheet format, past the chair where he'd been tied and broken, and then handed the exact leverage needed to destroy everything. Carlo waited by a black sedan, his expression carefully neutral. Ready? Celine nodded, not trusting her voice. The drive back to the penthouse was silent except for police sirens in the distance and the occasional burst of Carlo's radio. Chicago streaming past in neon and shadow, beautiful and brutal, and completely indifferent to whether she survived the night. When they arrived, Carlo walked her to the elevator. For what it's worth, the boss doesn't make emotional decisions. If he keeps you, it's because the math works. And if he doesn't, Carlo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. It's because the math doesn't. Nothing personal. Everything about this is personal. Yeah, maybe that's the problem. The elevator doors closed, carrying her back up to the penthouse that no longer felt like sanctuary. Just another expensive cage with better lighting. Celine locked herself in the guest room like Lucien had instructed. Sat on the bed, stared at her hands. $73,412. That's what her freedom cost. That's what might cost dozens of lives if Lucien decided she was worth fighting for. That's what made her exactly the kind of problem men like Lucien Moretti solved with strategic abandonment. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. Celine Vale. The voice was unfamiliar, male, calm, terrifying in its composure. My name is Vincent Calabrese. I believe we have some things to discuss. I don't know who you are. Yes, you do. Adrian Cross was kind enough to provide contact information, along with some very interesting details about your relationship with Lucien Moretti. I'm calling to offer you a choice. I don't want anything from you. You don't have to want it. You just have to survive it. Vincent's voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Here's how this works. In approximately 90 minutes, I'm meeting with Lucian to discuss your situation. I'm going to offer him a clean exit. He hands you over. We handle the theft situation. Everyone moves on. No war, no bodies, no complications. He'll never agree to that. Perhaps. Perhaps not. Men are unpredictable when their pride is involved. But you... He paused. You strike me as more practical. So I'm offering you the same choice directly. Come to me willingly. Confess to the theft, return the money, accept consequences, and I'll make sure Lucien Moretti's empire stays intact. Your sacrifice saves dozens of lives, possibly hundreds. All you have to do is turn yourself in. And if I refuse, then Lucien refuses, then I push, then he pushes back, then Chicago bleeds. And when the dust settles and the bodies are counted, everyone will know it's because one woman couldn't accept that her freedom wasn't worth a war. Celine's hand tightened on the phone. You're asking me to surrender. I'm asking you to be realistic. You're not worth what Lucien's about to sacrifice for you. And deep down you know that. So make the intelligent choice. Save his empire. Save his men. Save Chicago from a conflict it doesn't need. All you have to do is walk away. Where? I'll text you an address. Be there in 2 hours. Come alone. We'll discuss terms. And if I don't? Then you're gambling that Lucien Moretti values you more than everything he's built. That's a bold bet, Miss Vale. Are you sure you want to make it? The line went dead. Celine sat in the expensive silence of the guest room, the weight of impossible choices crushing down like physical pressure. She could stay. Let Lucien decide her fate. Risk war because she'd been too broken and too desperate to find a clean way out of Adrian's control. Or she could leave. Turn herself over to Vincent Calabrese. Accept whatever consequences he deemed appropriate. Save Lucien from having to choose between her and his empire. Either way, she lost. Either way, the girl who'd fought so hard to escape one cage was about to walk voluntarily into another. Her phone buzzed. Text message. An address on the south side. 2 hours. Celine looked at herself in the mirror across the room, saw the scared woman staring back. The survivor who'd stolen money and lied and made choices that kept her alive but stained her soul. The woman Lucien Moretti had decided to protect before knowing the full cost. The woman who was about to discover exactly how much protection was worth when empires hung in the balance. She had 2 hours to decide. 2 hours to determine if her life was worth the blood it would cost. 2 hours to choose between being saved and saving herself by surrendering to the very violence she'd been running from all along. Outside, Chicago glittered with winter stars and hidden threats, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. And somewhere in the darkness, Lucien Moretti was calculating costs and making the kind of decision that would define them both. The city held its breath, waiting for the answer to a question that had no right solution. How many lives was one woman worth? And who got to decide? Celine stared at the address on her phone for exactly 7 minutes before making the decision that would either save her or destroy her completely. She wasn't going to wait for Lucien to choose. She grabbed her coat, the expensive one from the closet that still smelled like someone else's life, and moved through the penthouse like a ghost. No note, no explanation. Just the quiet click of the door closing behind her and the elevator descending toward street level with mechanical indifference. The lobby security looked up as she passed. Miss Vale, Mr. Moretti left instructions. I'm just going for a walk. He said you shouldn't leave. I'm not his prisoner. The words came out harder than she intended. Am I? The guard hesitated, caught between orders and the reality that Lucien had never explicitly said to physically restrain her. No, ma'am. Then I'm leaving. Chicago's streets hit her with winter cold that burned her lungs. 2 a.m. and the city was transitioning between nightlife and early morning commerce. Drunk students stumbling toward dorms, delivery trucks rumbling through empty intersections, the perpetual hum of a place that never fully slept. Celine walked 4 blocks before hailing a cab, her hand shaking so badly she could barely open the door. Where to? The driver was Pakistani, middle-aged, looked like he'd seen enough of Chicago's darkness not to ask questions about young women traveling alone at 2 in the morning. She gave him the address Vincent Calabrese had texted. Southside Industrial Area. The kind of place where screams got swallowed by machinery noise and nobody called the police because everyone had reasons to avoid attention. The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "You sure about that location?" "I'm not sure about anything, but drive anyway." He did. 23 minutes of silent streets and gradually decaying neighborhoods. Wealth giving way to poverty with the mathematical precision of redlining and decades of systematic neglect. The buildings got shorter, darker, more wounded looking. Chain link fences appeared. Graffiti evolved from artistic to territorial. The address belonged to a meatpacking plant that looked abandoned except for 3 black SUVs parked outside and enough security lighting to make the place look like a stage set. Celine paid the driver with cash Lucien had left in the penthouse. "Thank you." "You need me to wait?" "No." "You sure?" "Because that place, I'm sure." She wasn't. But certainty was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. The cab disappeared into the night, leaving her alone on a street corner that smelled like old blood and industrial chemicals. The SUVs sat silent, their occupants invisible behind tinted glass. Watching. Waiting. Confirming she'd come alone like Vincent had demanded. Celine forced her legs to move forward. 30 feet to the entrance, 20, 10. The door opened before she reached it. Vincent Calabrese stood in the doorway like something out of a different era. Tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of face that looked distinguished until you noticed the eyes. Cold. Calculating. The eyes of someone who'd ordered deaths the way other people ordered coffee. "Miss Vale." His voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "I'm impressed. I didn't think you'd actually come. You gave me 2 hours. I'm early." Eager to resolve this situation, eager to stop running. The lie came out easily. She'd been practicing it the entire cab ride. Vincent stepped aside, gesturing toward the interior. "Then let's talk." The meatpacking plants inside was exactly what Celine expected. Hooks hanging from ceiling chains, metal tables that had hosted decades of butchery, drains in the concrete floor stained rust brown with blood and chemicals. The temperature hovered just above freezing, cold enough to preserve meat, cold enough to slow decomposition if something messier than meat needed processing. 4 men stood along the walls, armed, professional. Not the kind of hired muscle that got sloppy. The kind that followed orders precisely and never asked questions about what got ground up and shipped out in unmarked trucks. Vincent led her to a metal table in the center of the space. 2 chairs faced each other across steel that had been scrubbed clean, but would never quite lose the memory of what had happened on its surface. "Sit," Vincent said. Not unkindly, just stated fact. Celine sat. The metal chair was freezing through her jeans. She kept her hands in her coat pockets so Vincent wouldn't see them shaking. He settled across from her with the casual grace of someone completely in control. "I appreciate you coming. Shows maturity. Understanding of how these situations get resolved. You made it clear I didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices. You chose self-preservation over pride. That's smart." Vincent pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Adrian Cross has been very forthcoming about your relationship. The money, the theft, the systematic way you extracted funds over 6 months. Very clever, actually. Most people get greedy and take too much at once. You understood patience. I understood survival. Semantics. From where I sit, you committed theft. $73,000 stolen from a man whose only crime was loving you too much." Vincent looked up. "That's the story Adrian tells. That's the story that plays well in certain circles. Man gets his heart broken and robbed by a woman who uses abuse claims to justify criminal behavior. Do you know how many people find that narrative compelling?" "I don't care." "You should, because that narrative is what's going to start a war if Lucien Moretti keeps protecting you." Vincent leaned forward slightly. "Here's what I know. Lucien inserted himself into your situation without understanding the full picture, threatened a civilian, brought him to a warehouse, and made promises he can't take back. All because he decided you were worth protecting. That makes him look weak, makes him look manipulable, makes him look like a man who makes decisions based on emotion instead of strategy." "So you're going to exploit that?" "I'm going to offer him a clean exit, return you to us. Let us handle the theft situation appropriately. He maintains his reputation, no loss of face, No war. Everyone wins except you. And what happens to me? Vincent smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. That depends on how cooperative you are. Return the money in full, with interest for the inconvenience, and I'll consider this resolved. We'll relocate you somewhere far from Chicago. New identity, clean start. You'll never see Adrian Cross again, never see Lucien Moretti again. You'll just disappear into whatever life you build next. And if I can't return the money? Then we have a problem, because theft without restitution requires other forms of payment. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees, though the thermometer didn't move. Celine forced herself to meet his gaze. I spent the money. Rent, food, survival. I don't have $73,000 sitting in an account somewhere. Unfortunate. Vincent's expression didn't change. But not insurmountable. You're young, attractive, capable. There are ways to work off debt. Would take time, maybe a year, maybe 3. Depends how quickly you adapt to new employment opportunities. The implication hung in the cold air like a physical presence. Celine's stomach turned to ice. You're talking about trafficking. I'm talking about debt resolution. What you call it is your business. Vincent's tone remained pleasant, conversational, like they were discussing a mortgage instead of slavery. But that's worst-case scenario. Ideally, you convince Lucien to pay the debt himself. $73,000 is nothing to a man of his resources. He cares about you enough to threaten war. Surely he cares enough to write a check. He'll never agree to that. Then you better hope you're wrong, because the meeting I have with him in... Vincent checked his watch. 42 minutes is going to determine whether this situation resolves cleanly or whether Chicago descends into the kind of violence that makes national news. And that outcome depends entirely on whether Lucien Moretti thinks you're worth $73,000 and a loss of respect. He won't come. Oh, he'll come. He's probably already on his way. Probably already figured out you left his penthouse. Probably already running calculations about what it means that you came here without telling him. Vincent's smile widened. You made this easier for me, Miss Vale. By running straight into my hands, you've demonstrated exactly what I needed to prove, that you're not loyal, not trustworthy, not worth the empire Lucien would have to sacrifice to keep you. So thank you for that. Celine's mind raced. She'd walked into a trap, thought she was making a choice, thought she was saving Lucien from having to choose between her and his organization. Instead, she'd just handed Vincent the exact leverage he needed to destroy Lucien's credibility. What if I refuse everything? She asked quietly. What if I tell you to go to hell and walk out of here right now? Then you don't walk out. Vincent said it simply, matter of fact. My men stop you, and when Lucien arrives for our meeting, he finds your body as evidence of what happens when people cross the Calabrese family. That starts the war immediately, of course, but at least you won't be alive to see the casualties. You'd kill me just to prove a point? I'd kill you to demonstrate that decisions have consequences. That's how power works, Miss Vale. Through the consistent application of promised violence. Lucien understands that. You're about to learn it. The door behind them slammed open with enough force to rattle the hanging chains. Lucien Moretti stood in the entrance with Carlo and 6 men who looked like they'd been pulled from deep cover operations. Tactical gear, suppressed weapons, the kind of security detail that didn't exist on any official payroll. His eyes found Celine immediately. The expression on his face was beyond anger, beyond betrayal. Something colder and more dangerous. The look of a man who'd just had his worst calculation confirmed. You left, he said quietly. Not a question, an accusation. Celine's voice cracked. I thought I was helping. You thought wrong. Lucien's gaze shifted to Vincent. We had a meeting scheduled. Neutral location, witnesses, rules of engagement. And you decided to move up the timeline by using her as bait. Vincent stood slowly, his hands visible and empty. She came willingly. Called her a cab herself. Walked through my door without coercion. That's not bait. That's her making intelligent choices about self-preservation. Or you threatened her into coming. I offered her options. She chose one. Are you really going to start a war over a woman who ran to me the moment she understood the real cost of your protection? The words hit Lucien like physical blows. Celine saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands curled into fists, the way something behind his eyes flickered between rage and something that looked almost like pain. Celine. He didn't move toward her, didn't cross the space between them, just stared at her like she was a stranger. Why? Because I didn't want you to have to choose. Her voice came out broken. Because every scenario ends with people dying because I stole money to escape an abuser. Because I'm not worth a war, Lucian. And you know it. You don't get to make that calculation. Someone has to, and you were stalling, weighing options, running numbers on how many lives my survival costs. I saw it in your face at the warehouse, so I made the choice for you. Tears were streaming down her face now, hot against freezing air. I chose to not let you destroy everything you built for someone who lied to you. I didn't ask you to protect me. You shouldn't have to. That's what caring about someone means. She laughed bitterly. You taught me that. You stepped between me and Adrian without being asked. You decided I was worth protecting even though it made you vulnerable. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm protecting you from the consequences of caring about me by removing myself from the equation. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Vincent. She stays with me. That's not on the table anymore. Then I'm changing the table. Lucian's voice dropped to something lethal. Celine Vale is under my protection. That hasn't changed. Won't change. You want war over $73,000 and a domestic dispute? I'll give you war. Right here. Right now. Because I'm done negotiating over people I've decided matter. Vincent's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. A choice that costs you everything. Maybe, but it's still mine to make. Lucian finally looked at Celine again. And before you argue, before you try to martyr yourself to save my empire, understand something. I've built organizations before. I can build them again. But I only get one chance to prove I'm not the kind of man who sacrifices people to maintain power. So you're coming with me, whether you agree with the math or not. Lucien, no. You don't get to surrender to save me. You don't get to decide your life is worth less than stability. That's my calculation to make, and I'm making it right now in front of witnesses with full understanding of the consequences. You're mine to protect, and I don't hand over what's mine, not for money, not for peace, not for anything. Vincent sighed heavily. Then we have a problem. We've had a problem since you thought you could use her as leverage. Now we're just acknowledging it openly. You're outnumbered, 6 men against 12, my facility, my territory. Even if you're good, and I know you're good, you don't walk out of here intact. Maybe not, but neither do you. Lucian gestured almost imperceptibly. His men spread out along the walls with tactical precision, creating crossing fields of fire that turned the entire space into a kill box. Carlo called in reinforcements 40 minutes ago. There are currently 20 men surrounding this building, sniper positions on 3 adjacent rooftops. The moment shooting starts inside, they breach every entrance simultaneously. You want a war, Vincent? It starts right here. Right now. With both of us bleeding out on your butcher floor while Chicago tears itself apart outside. That what you want? Mas. Vincent's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Am I? Lucian pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. A voice came through immediately. Ready on your signal, boss. Stand by. Lucian ended the call and looked at Vincent with absolute calm. That was my head of security confirming we have overwhelming tactical advantage. You could start shooting right now. Kill some of my men. Maybe kill me. But you won't survive the response, and your organization will be leaderless by sunrise. So here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to let Celine walk out of here with me. You're going to accept that this situation is resolved. And you're going to remember that threatening people under my protection has consequences. And the money? What money? Vincent's expression turned dangerous. The $73,000 she stole, reparations for financial abuse, not theft, which means there's nothing to repay. Lucian's voice went flat. But if it makes you feel better about this loss, I'll write Adrian Cross a check for the full amount. Consider it a gift for his cooperation in documenting his own abusive behavior. That resolve your concern about legal standing? It resolves nothing. This is about respect. Then respect this. Lucien took 3 steps forward, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. I don't negotiate over people I've decided to protect. I don't hand them over to avoid conflict. I don't calculate their worth against stability. I just protect them, with everything I have, for as long as necessary. That's how I operate. That's who I am. And if you don't like it, if you think it makes me weak or manipulable or whatever story you've been telling yourself, then test it. Right now. Start shooting. See what happens. The tension in the room was suffocating. Everyone's hands near weapons. Everyone's eyes tracking movement. One wrong word and the entire space would explode into violence that couldn't be contained. Vincent stared at Lucien for a long moment, calculating, weighing, running the same kind of cost-benefit analysis that had kept him alive through decades of organized crime. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. You think you can protect her forever? You think your enemies won't notice? Won't exploit it? Let them try. Lucien gestured to Celine without looking away from Vincent. Get up, we're leaving. Celine stood on shaking legs, crossed the space between them like walking through water. Every step felt wrong. Every step felt like she was dragging Lucien deeper into consequences she'd created. But his hand closed around her wrist when she reached him, not tight, not controlling, just steady, and pulled her behind him with the casual protection of someone shielding something valuable from damage. Carlo, Lucien said quietly, get her to the car. Carlo moved immediately, his hand on Celine's elbow, guiding her toward the door while Lucien stayed between them and Vincent's men. This starts a war, Vincent called after them. You know that, right? Every family, every organization, they'll all see this as weakness. They'll come after her to prove you can be broken. Then they'll learn what happens when people threaten things I've decided matter. Lucien's voice remained calm. Absolute. I've ended organizations for less, Vincent. Don't make me add yours to the list. He backed toward the exit, his men maintaining position, weapons ready but not raised. Professional. Controlled. The kind of tactical withdrawal that demonstrated strength instead of weakness. They made it to the door. Through the door. Into the cold Chicago night where 5 additional vehicles had appeared, sleek, black, bristling with armed men who looked like they'd been pulled from military operations. Celine found herself pushed into the back of a Mercedes, Lucien sliding in beside her, Carlo taking the front passenger seat while the driver peeled away from the meatpacking plant with controlled urgency. For 30 seconds, nobody spoke. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement and the distant wail of sirens that might have been related, or might have been the city's constant background noise. Then Lucien turned to her. You left. I thought, you thought you'd sacrifice yourself to save me from having to choose. You thought surrendering to Vincent Calabrese would resolve this cleanly. You thought your life was worth less than the stability of my organization. His voice was completely devoid of emotion, which somehow made it worse. You thought wrong. I was trying to help. You were trying to make yourself smaller, trying to disappear, trying to become the kind of person who doesn't deserve protection because accepting protection costs something. Lucien's hands were shaking slightly, the first sign of lost composure she'd ever seen from him. Do you have any idea what I thought when I found you gone? When Carlo confirmed you'd left the building against explicit instructions? When we tracked your cab to that address and I realized you'd walked straight into the one place I couldn't protect you without starting the exact war you were trying to prevent? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cover it. His voice rose slightly. You made yourself bait. You made yourself leverage. You handed Vincent everything he needed to prove I'm vulnerable. And worse, you did it because you decided unilaterally that your life wasn't worth fighting for. Who gave you that authority, Celine? Who told you that you get to calculate your own worth and determine that it falls short? Nobody had to tell me. I know what I cost you tonight. I know what keeping me safe means for your organization. You know nothing. Lucien's composure finally cracked completely. You know nothing about what I've built or how I maintain it or what I'm willing to sacrifice to prove I'm not the kind of man who abandons people the moment protection gets expensive. You think this is about money? About territory? About respect? It's about proving that when I decide someone matters, they fucking matter. Consequences don't change that. Costs don't change that. Other people's opinions about my choices don't change that. The only thing that changes it is death, mine or theirs. That's the only variable that ends my protection. And you tried to remove yourself from that equation by walking into a trap. Do you understand how close you came to forcing me to start the war you were trying to prevent? How close I came to burning Vincent's organization to the ground because he had you in a room with armed men? But you didn't, because he blinked first, because he calculated that I meant every word and decided dying tonight wasn't worth proving a point. But if he'd called my bluff, if he'd decided to test whether I'd really start a war over you, that entire building would be a crematorium right now and you'd be dead in the crossfire. Is that what you wanted? Is that the help you were offering? Celine couldn't stop crying. I didn't know what else to do. You were calculating costs, weighing options. I saw it in your face. The moment when you realized protecting me meant losing everything else, and you decided to make the choice for me. Lucien's voice dropped back to something quieter, more dangerous. You decided you knew better than I did what I could afford to lose. That's not trust, Celine. That's condescension. You didn't trust me to choose you. Didn't trust that maybe, just maybe, I've spent my entire life building organizations precisely so I have the resources to protect people without negotiation, without compromise, without abandoning them the moment someone threatens consequences. I was trying to save you. I don't need saving. I need you to trust that when I say I'm protecting you, I mean it completely. No conditions, no calculations, no point at which the math tips against you and I hand you over to make my life easier. He was staring at her with something between fury and desperation. I have killed men for less than what Vincent tried tonight. I have destroyed organizations for making threats. I have burned entire territories to prove a point about what happens when people test my boundaries. And you think I'd do any less for someone I've decided matters? You think I'd let them take you because the alternative was inconvenient? You said you might have to choose. I said I was considering every option. That's strategy. That's due diligence. That's making sure I understand the full picture before committing to a path I can't walk back from. But the moment you left, the moment I realized you'd surrendered yourself to save me from having to choose, every calculation disappeared. There was only one option left: get you back. Whatever it cost, however many bodies it required, that became the only math that mattered. The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, Chicago's skyline glittering to their right like a circuit board designed by someone who'd never heard of subtlety. Carlo spoke quietly from the front seat. Boss, we've got a problem. What kind? Vincent made calls immediately after we left, to everyone, every organization, every family with territory in Chicago. He's spinning this as you choosing a woman over business, calling emergency sit-downs, building a coalition. Let him. Boss, let him. Lucian's voice carried absolute finality. If Vincent Calabrese wants to spend political capital convincing other organizations that caring about people makes me weak, he's welcome to try. And when his argument falls apart, because I demonstrate exactly how strong someone has to be to protect what they care about while maintaining empire, when he's isolated and outmaneuvered and wondering how his tactical advantage disappeared, he'll understand why I'm still running Chicago and he's running a meat-packing plant. You're going to war. I'm going to demonstrate why declaring war on me was the last mistake Vincent Calabrese makes. There's a difference. Carlo nodded slowly. What do you need? Every asset we have, every favor owed, every piece of leverage we've accumulated over 3 years of careful positioning. I want Vincent's suppliers pressured, his distribution networks compromised, his political protection removed. I want him bleeding resources faster than he can replace them. And I want it done quietly enough that he doesn't realize he's being dismantled until it's too late to stop it. That'll take weeks, maybe months. Then we have time to be thorough. Lucien finally looked away from Celine, his attention shifting to the tactical problem in front of him. Vincent made a mistake tonight. He thought threatening someone I care about would force me to choose between sentiment and strategy. Instead, he just demonstrated to every other organization exactly what happens when people test my boundaries. By the time I'm done, he'll be an object lesson, and nobody will ever question whether I mean what I say about protection again. The car pulled up to the penthouse building. Security opened the doors immediately, their presence doubled since Celine had left hours earlier. Lucien climbed out, then extended a hand to help her. She took it automatically, her legs barely supporting her weight. They rode the elevator in silence, walked through the penthouse without speaking. The dawn was starting to break over Lake Michigan, pink and gold light spilling across the water like something beautiful, pretending the night's violence hadn't happened. Finally, in the center of the living room, Lucien turned to face her fully. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said quietly, "and I need you to answer honestly. Can you live with what I'm about to do? Can you accept that Vincent Calabrese is going to disappear? Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon, because he threatened you? Can you carry that weight? Because if you can't, if you're going to spend the rest of your life questioning whether you're worth the violence I'm about to commit, then we need to have a different conversation right now." Celine met his gaze, thought about Adrian stalking her for 3 months, about Vincent's casual discussion of trafficking, about the constant grinding fear that had defined her existence since she'd escaped one man's control, only to become target practice for every other man who thought women were property to be claimed or corrected. "I can live with it," she said. "Can you?" "I've lived with worse." Lucien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "But this is different. This is personal. And personal violence leaves different scars. Then we'll be scarred together." He smiled without humor. "That's the most honest thing you've said all night." "I'm tired of lying." Celine's voice cracked. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of making myself smaller to avoid being hurt. I stole that money because I needed to survive. I left your penthouse tonight because I thought I was protecting you. And I'm standing here now because you decided I was worth more than peace. So whatever happens next, whatever violence follows, because I exist in your world, I'll carry it. Not easily, not cleanly, but I'll carry it." "Good." Lucien closed the distance between them finally, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. "Because there's no going back after tonight. Vincent will push. Other families will watch. And when this resolves, when I've proven that threatening you was the worst mistake anyone could make, the entire city will know you matter to me. That makes you power. That makes you leverage. That makes you someone people will try to exploit for the rest of your life. Can you survive that?" "With you?" "Yes. Even knowing I'm the reason you'll be targeted? You're also the reason I'm still breathing." Lucien's thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away tears she didn't realize were still falling. "Don't leave again. Don't try to protect me by surrendering yourself. Don't make choices about your own worth without consulting the man who's decided you're worth everything. That's the only rule that matters now. Can you follow it?" "I can try." "Try harder." But his voice carried affection underneath the command. "Because the next time you walk into an enemy facility to save me from difficult decisions, I won't be calm about extraction. I'll level the building and ask questions later. Understood?" "Understood." He kissed her then, not gently, not tentatively, with the bruising intensity of someone who'd almost lost something and wasn't letting go again. Celine kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his jacket, her body pressed against his like gravity had shifted, and he was the only stable thing in a tilting world. When they finally broke apart, Chicago was fully awake outside. Morning traffic building, the city transitioning into daylight routines, completely oblivious to the war that had almost started in a meatpacking plant while most people slept. Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. Vincent just made his first mistake. What did he do? Called a sit-down with the Bratva, trying to build an alliance against me. Lucien smiled, and it was not a kind smile. He doesn't know I've been in negotiations with them for 6 months about territory sharing. They're going to tell him to resolve his own problems before dragging them into conflicts that don't benefit anyone. So you win? So I don't lose. There's a difference. He typed something rapidly, sent it, and pocketed the phone. But yes, Vincent's coalition is already failing. By tomorrow, he'll be isolated. By next week, he'll be desperate. And by the end of the month, Lucien's voice went cold. He'll be gone. Quietly. Permanently. With enough plausible deniability that no one can prove I was involved. That's how this works, Celine. Not with dramatic shootouts, not with public declarations of war, just the slow, systematic dismantling of everything someone built until there's nothing left but the example they became. That's terrifying. That's survival. It's the same thing, isn't it, in your world? In every world, most people just pretend otherwise. Lucien guided her toward the hallway. You need sleep, real sleep, without wondering if someone's going to break down the door. I'll be here. My men will be here. And Vincent Calabrese will be too busy trying to hold his organization together to bother you again. What about Adrian? What about him? He started this. He gave Vincent the information. Adrian Cross is already handled. Lucien's tone suggested the matter was closed. He's on a plane to London, not New York. London, with a job offer he couldn't refuse and a very clear understanding that returning to the United States would be the last decision he ever makes. He's not your problem anymore. Just like that? Just like that. I told you, when I protect people, I do it completely. Celine stopped at the guest room door. I don't want to sleep alone tonight. Lucien studied her carefully. You sure? I'm not sure about anything except that I'm tired of being afraid. And when I'm with you, I'm less afraid than I've been in years, so yes, I'm sure. He nodded slowly, then guided her to the master bedroom, a space she'd glimpsed but never entered. Massive windows overlooking the lake, minimalist furniture, everything expensive and impersonal except for the books stacked on the nightstand. Philosophy, strategy, history. The reading material of someone who'd built an empire through understanding human nature's darkest patterns. They lay down fully clothed on top of the covers, Celine's head on Lucien's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, proof of life, proof of safety, proof that for tonight at least nothing could reach her. Lucien? She whispered. Yeah? Thank you for tonight, for choosing me even when it cost everything. It didn't cost everything. His hand moved through her hair with unexpected gentleness. It cost some things, but not everything. And what I gained, he paused, searching for words. What I gained was worth more than what I lost. What did you gain? Proof that I'm still human underneath all this, that I can still care about something other than territory and power and control. That's worth protecting, even if it comes with blood attached. Celine closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. We're going to hell for this, aren't we? Probably. Lucien's voice carried dark amusement. But at least we'll go together. Outside, Chicago glittered with spring morning light, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. And somewhere in the industrial South Side, Vincent Calabrese was discovering that declaring war on Lucien Moretti came with consequences that couldn't be negotiated away. The city held its breath, waiting for the final move in a game that had only one possible ending. Vincent would disappear, Adrian would stay disappeared, and Celine Vale would finally understand what it meant to be loved by someone powerful enough to make the world bend to protect her. The cost would be measured in bodies and blood and moral compromises that would stain them both. But in the moment, wrapped in Lucien's arms, while dawn broke over the city they'd almost burned down, it felt like something close to salvation. Even if salvation wore the face of damnation, even if freedom looked like choosing one cage over another, even if love meant accepting that sometimes survival required becoming the kind of person who could live with violence committed in their name. Celine fell asleep to the sound of Lucien's heartbeat and the distant hum of a city that would never know how close it came to war over one woman's refusal to keep being a victim. And in the darkness behind her closed eyes, she finally stopped running. Vincent Calabrese disappeared on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the meatpacking plant confrontation. Not dramatically, not publicly, just stopped existing in the way people do when powerful men decide their continued presence is inconvenient. His car was found abandoned near the docks, with the keys still in the ignition and no signs of struggle. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment looked lived in but empty, like he'd stepped out for coffee and simply never returned. The police investigated for approximately 48 hours before quietly closing the case as a voluntary disappearance. Men like Vincent had enemies. Men like Vincent made choices that sometimes required sudden relocation. The official report suggested he'd fled Chicago to avoid unspecified business complications. Nobody believed it, but nobody questioned it either. Because questioning meant looking too closely at the systematic dismantling of the Calabrese organization that had occurred over 3 weeks with surgical precision, suppliers who suddenly refused shipments, distribution networks that mysteriously collapsed, political protection that evaporated overnight. Bank accounts frozen by federal investigations that materialized from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly once their purpose was served. By the time Vincent vanished, there was nothing left of his empire except debt and the cautionary tale it became. Celine learned about it from the morning news while drinking coffee in Lucian's kitchen, watching a reporter stand outside Vincent's empty apartment building and speculate about organized crime and the dangers of crossing unspecified powerful interests. The reporter never mentioned Lucian's name. Nobody did. That was the difference between violence that announced itself and violence that simply resolved problems. Lucien had promised Vincent would disappear quietly, permanently, with enough plausible deniability that no one could prove involvement. He'd kept that promise the way he kept all his promises, absolutely and without apology. Celine should have felt something watching the news coverage. Guilt, maybe. Horror at being the reason a man ceased to exist. Some emotional response proportional to the weight of a life ended because he'd threatened hers. Instead, she just felt tired and safe and grateful in a way that probably condemned her soul but kept her breathing. Lucien emerged from his office wearing the same suit he'd left in 6 hours earlier, his hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it during whatever late-night crisis management had kept him awake. He glanced at the television, registered the news coverage, and poured himself coffee without comment. "You knew," Celine said quietly. "Not an accusation, just observation." "I always know." "When? Does it matter? I need to know if I'm living with someone who ordered a murder this morning or 3 days ago. The timeline feels important." Lucien smiled without humor. 8 days ago. He was given multiple opportunities to back down, multiple chances to accept that this situation was resolved and move on with diminished but intact operations. He chose escalation instead, so the timeline accelerated. What did he do? Hired someone to follow you. Photographer, trying to document patterns for a second attempt. Lucian's voice remained conversational, but his hands tightened around the coffee mug. The photographer was former police, professional, good at staying invisible. He followed you for 3 days before my people noticed him. Took approximately 200 photos. Your apartment building, the route you walked to Belladonna's, the coffee shop you stop at on Thursdays. Every pattern, every routine, every vulnerability. Celine's stomach turned over. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have stopped living. Would have gone back to that hypervigilant state where every shadow is a threat and every stranger is a potential attack. I didn't want that for you. He set down the mug carefully. So I handled it. The photographer was paid triple what Vincent offered him to disappear with his equipment and never mention Chicago again. And Vincent was given one final warning that further attempts to harm you would result in permanent consequences. He ignored the warning. So here we are. Here we are, Celine repeated hollowly, with a man dead because he wouldn't leave me alone. With a man dead because he made choices that required correction. Don't carry his weight, Celine. He built this ending through every decision he made after I told him you were protected. That's on him, not you. That's a convenient way to avoid guilt. That's an accurate assessment of cause and effect. Lucien moved to stand beside her, his shoulder barely touching hers. Vincent Calabrese had multiple exits, multiple opportunities to walk away intact. He chose pride over survival. That's not your fault. That's not even my fault. That's just what happens when men confuse temporary power with permanent invincibility. The news coverage shifted to other stories. Traffic accidents, political scandals, the constant churn of a city that moved forward regardless of who disappeared in the night. Celine turned off the television. The silence that followed felt heavier than the news coverage. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. I'm listening. I'm not going back to Belladonna's. Lucien's expression didn't change. Okay? That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That you have to keep working there? That waitressing is crucial to my plans for you? I don't own your career, Celine. If you want to quit, quit. I don't want to quit. I want to do something else. Something mine. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a folder she'd been building for 2 weeks, and showed him. Design work. Branding. Visual identity for small businesses. I've been taking on freelance projects, 4 clients so far. Not much money yet. But it's mine. My skills. My time. My choices. Lucien studied the designs carefully. A logo for a bakery. Website mock-ups for a legal aid clinic. Branding package for a startup that probably wouldn't survive 6 months, but had enthusiasm and a shoestring budget. These are good. They're rough. I'm still learning the software, still figuring out pricing, still terrified I'm going to fail spectacularly and prove Adrian right about my artistic delusions. Adrian's opinion stopped mattering the moment he boarded a plane to London. And these aren't rough. They're competent, professional. Better than half the design work I see from established firms. He handed back the phone. What do you need to make this viable? Time, space, probably some business education I don't have, and she hesitated. And what? I need to not be the woman Lucien Moretti is protecting. I need to be someone who builds something on my own merit. Not because clients are afraid to turn down work that might be connected to you. Not because people hire me to buy favor. Just as myself. As Celine Vale, designer. Not as your... She struggled for the word. My what? I don't know what we are. Partner seems too corporate. Girlfriend seems too trivial for what we've survived. And anything more than that implies futures I'm not sure we get to have. Lucien set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. You're the woman I chose to protect when I could have walked away. The woman I threatened war over. The woman I dismantled an organization for. The woman I wake up next to and fall asleep beside and think about during meetings when I should be focusing on territory negotiations. That's what you are. The label doesn't matter. The reality does. The reality is complicated. The reality is simple. Everything else is complicated. He cupped her face gently. And as for building something on your own merit, you already are. The fact that you're with me doesn't diminish your talent. It just means you're building from a position of safety instead of desperation. That's not a weakness. That's an advantage you earned by surviving long enough to claim it. I don't want people to think... People will think whatever serves their narrative. You can't control that. You can only control whether you let their opinions stop you from doing the work you're capable of. His thumb traced her cheekbone with familiar tenderness. So build your business, take on clients, create things. And when people whisper about whether you got opportunities because of me, you can show them the quality of your work and watch them choke on their assumptions. That's how you win. Not by avoiding association with me, but by being undeniably good at what you do. Celine leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. When did you get so wise about creative careers? I run a criminal empire. Half my job is branding and reputation management. The skill set transfers. She laughed despite herself. That's the most Lucien Moretti answer possible. I contain multitudes. He kissed her forehead. Now, about belladonnas. Give them 2 weeks' notice, professional exit, and if the manager gives you problems, let me know. I'll make it clear that burning bridges with you is burning bridges with me. I don't want special treatment. You're getting it anyway. That's what happens when you're with someone who has the power to make things easier. You can reject it on principle and struggle unnecessarily, or you can accept it gracefully and focus your energy on building something that matters. Your choice. Celine opened her eyes, studying his face. The sharp angles softened by morning light, the careful control that occasionally cracked to reveal something more vulnerable underneath. The contradiction of a man who ordered deaths with casual efficiency, but touched her like she was something precious that might break. I love you, she said. Not because the moment demanded it, not because it was strategic or earned or any of the calculated reasons people offered those words. Just because it was true and she was tired of not saying true things. Lucien went very still. Say that again. I love you. I probably shouldn't. I definitely shouldn't, given that you're a criminal who solves problems with violence and I'm supposed to be building a life that doesn't include moral compromise. But I do. I love you. The parts that protect me and the parts that terrify everyone else and the parts that somehow manage to be both simultaneously. So there it is. I love you. Do with that what you will. For a long moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he kissed her with enough intensity to erase any doubt about whether the feeling was mutual. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I love you too, he whispered. And I'm probably going to ruin you, going to stain you with proximity to everything I am, going to make you complicit in violence you never asked for. But I love you anyway, selfishly, completely, with full knowledge that loving me costs something you can never get back. So if you want to run, If you want to take your design work and build a life somewhere far from Chicago and men who solve problems the way I do, I'll let you go. I'll set you up with enough money and protection that you'll never have to look over your shoulder. That's the last exit I'm offering. Take it now or accept that what comes next is permanent. Tit. Celine pulled back enough to meet his eyes directly. I'm not running. You should. I know. But I'm not. She traced the line of his jaw, feeling the tension there. I spent 3 years running from one man and 3 months running from the aftermath. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of making myself smaller to avoid being hurt. So no, Lucien, I'm not taking the exit. I'm staying with you in Chicago, building something mine while being yours. And if that makes me complicit, if that stains my soul, then at least I chose it. That's more agency than I've had in years. But it's going to get harder. Other organizations will test whether you're a weakness. They'll try to use you as leverage. And you'll stop them. The way you stopped Vincent, the way you stopped Adrian. That's what you do. You protect things you've decided matter. So let them try. Let them test. Let them learn the same lesson everyone else has learned. I'm not going anywhere. Lucien's smile was equal parts relief and resignation. Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are. For the record, this is the part where I'm supposed to tell you we'll have a normal life. White picket fence. Sunday dinners. All the domesticity that makes up for the violence. But I can't promise that. Can't promise normal when my life is built on abnormal. Can only promise that whatever we build will be ours. Scarred. Complicated. Stained with the cost of survival. But ours. I don't want normal. Normal got me trapped with Adrian thinking abuse was love. I want real, messy, honest about its costs. That's worth more than any white picket fence fantasy. Then we're on the same page. Lucien glanced at his watch. I have a meeting in 2 hours. Territory negotiation with the Bratva about the power vacuum Vincent left behind. Should be straightforward, but might run long. You'll be okay here? I'll be fine. I have client work to finish. And I'm meeting Marcus for coffee later. He's helping me set up proper digital security for the business. Good. Marcus is paranoid enough to keep you safe even when I'm not watching. Lucien grabbed his jacket, checked his phone for messages, and moved toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back. Celine? Yeah? Thank you for staying, for choosing this, for not running when I gave you the chance. I don't say this often because it's usually a liability, but you make me want to be something other than what I am, not better. I'm too far gone for better. But more than just the violence, more than just the empire. Something that includes those things, but isn't defined by them. So thank you for seeing that possibility and not flinching. You're welcome. And Lucien? Yeah? You're wrong about being too far gone for better. You chose me over war. That's already better than most men would manage. So maybe don't write off redemption quite yet. He smiled, genuinely this time, without the careful control that usually guarded his expressions. Redemption. That's optimistic. I'm a designer. Optimism about impossible transformations is part of the job description. Then I'm in good hands. He left with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years navigating dangerous situations and always emerged intact. The apartment settled into silence after he was gone. Celine stood in the kitchen for a moment, processing everything. Vincent was dead. Adrian was exiled. She'd built the foundation of a business that belonged to her, and she'd just told Chicago's most dangerous criminal she loved him. 3 months ago, she had been cowering in a restaurant bathroom, convinced she'd never escape the suffocating control of a man who mistook possession for devotion. Now she was standing in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, drinking expensive coffee and planning the business she'd build beside someone who'd torn down organizations to keep her safe. The transformation should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like survival with better furniture. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Coffee at 3. I've got security protocols for your client files and some ideas about encrypting your communications. She typed back, perfect. See you then. Another text came through immediately. Unknown number. Celine's stomach dropped instinctively, months of conditioning making her brace for threat. Then the message loaded. Hi, I'm Rachel from Greenhouse Bakery. I got your name from the legal clinic you designed for. Do you have time to discuss branding for my business? I have a small budget, but big ideas. Let me know. Not a threat, just a potential client. Just someone who'd seen her work and wanted to hire her based on merit. Celine exhaled slowly, forcing her nervous system to recognize that not every unknown number carried danger. She replied, "I'd love to discuss it. When works for you?" The conversation continued. Details about the bakery, Rachel's vision, timeline expectations. Normal business communication. The kind of professional interaction Celine had dreamed about during all those years waitressing while Adrian convinced her that artistic ambitions were delusions. By the time the exchange concluded with a meeting scheduled for Friday, Celine was smiling. This was real. This was hers. This was the life she'd stolen $73,000 to build, not just escape from danger, but escape toward purpose. The money was gone now, used for survival and security deposits and all the infrastructure required to rebuild from nothing. She'd never be able to repay it, didn't want to. That money represented the price of her freedom, and freedom wasn't something she owed restitution for. Adrian would disagree, would probably spend the rest of his life convincing himself she'd destroyed him maliciously instead of desperately. But Adrian was in London now, living whatever exile Lucien had arranged, and his opinion had exactly as much weight as she gave it, which was none. Celine spent the next 3 hours working on the legal clinic's website revisions, losing herself in the technical problem-solving that had always quieted her mind. Color theory, user experience, the satisfaction of making something functional beautiful and something beautiful functional. She was deep in CSS troubleshooting when her phone rang, Carlo's name on the screen. "Hello? Celine, you alone?" Carlo's voice carried tension that immediately put her on alert. "Yes. Lucien's in a meeting. Why?" "I need you to listen carefully and not panic. Adrian Cross is back in Chicago." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "He landed at O'Hare 4 hours ago using a passport we didn't know he had. British, different name. We only caught it because facial recognition flagged him at customs. He's not supposed to be here. The agreement was explicit. He stays in London. He lives. He comes back. Consequences are permanent." "Does Lucien know?" "I called him first. He's handling the Bratva meeting, but says to keep you at the penthouse until he can confirm Adrian's location and intentions. I've got men outside the building. You're safe there. But don't leave. Don't answer the door for anyone except Lucien or me. Understood?" "Understood." Celine's hands were shaking. "Carlo, why would he come back? He knows what happens if—" "I don't know. Maybe desperation. Maybe stupidity. Maybe he's decided dying is worth one last attempt to hurt you. Doesn't matter. What matters is you stay put until we locate him. I'm on my way to you now. 20 minutes. "Okay." "Celine, I mean it. Don't leave. Don't open windows. Don't even go near the balcony. If something happens before I get there, you call 911 first and Lucien second, not the other way around. Understand why? Because police response is faster. Because documented protection matters if this goes wrong. We need official record that you were defending yourself. So 911 first. Always. Got it?" "Got it." Carlo hung up. Celine stood in the center of the living room, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Adrian was back. Adrian was in Chicago. Adrian had violated the one boundary that guaranteed his survival, which meant Lucien was going to kill him. Not arrange disappearance, not facilitate école, actually kill him. Because that was the consequence Lucien had promised, and Lucien kept his promises absolutely. Celine should have felt horror at being the reason another man would die, should have felt the weight of blood spilled in her name crushing down like physical pressure. Instead, she just felt angry, furious that after everything, after stealing money to escape, after 3 months of stalking, after Lucien had given him a clean exit to London, Adrian still couldn't let her go, still had to violate the boundary, still had to prove that his need for control mattered more than his own survival. Her phone buzzed, text from unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She almost didn't open it, almost called Carlo back immediately and reported contact, but something made her look. The message was simple. "I know you're in there. We need to talk. Please, Celine, just talk. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave. I promise." She stared at the words, her mind racing through options. Call Carlo. Don't respond. Wait for Lucien. Let the professionals handle this. Another text. I'm outside. I can see the lights on. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to explain. Need you to understand why I had to come back, please. Celine moved to the window carefully, staying to the side where she couldn't be seen clearly. 10 floors down, a figure stood on the sidewalk across the street. Even from this distance, she recognized Adrian's posture. The way he stood, the way he moved. A third text. I'm unarmed. I'm not a threat. I just want to talk, like adults, like we used to. Remember when we could talk? The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been funny if it wasn't pathetic. Rewriting history, pretending their relationship had included mutual conversation instead of his monologues and her strategic silence. Celine's fingers moved before her brain fully processed the decision. She typed, "We have nothing to talk about. Leave Chicago. This is your last warning." She watched from the window as Adrian pulled out his phone, read the message, and looked up at the building. Even from this distance, she could see him smiling. His reply came immediately. "There she is. My Celine. Still trying to control the narrative, still pretending you didn't destroy 3 years of my life. But I forgive you. I came back to tell you that. I forgive you for stealing from me, for lying, for running to that criminal. I forgive all of it. We can start over. New city, new life. Away from Moretti and his violence. Just us, like it should have been." Celine's anger crystallized into something colder. She typed, "I don't want your forgiveness. I want you gone. You were given an exit. You should have taken it. I tried, Celine, I really tried. But I can't sleep, can't eat, can't stop thinking about what you took from me. Not the money, you. You're what I can't let go of. And I know you feel the same way. I know underneath all the fear and manipulation from Moretti, you still care about me, about us. So please, just 5 minutes, face to face. Let me remind you what we were before he got inside your head." She almost laughed, almost appreciated the audacity of Adrian showing up in Chicago, violating the one boundary that guaranteed his death and still trying to gaslight her into believing she was the problem. Another text. "I'm coming up, just to talk. I know the building code. I watched you punch it in months ago. I memorized it. Because I pay attention to you, because I care. That's what love is, Celine. Paying attention." Panic spiked through her anger. She immediately called Carlo. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "Adrian's outside. He's texting me. He says he's coming up." "Fuck." "Okay. Lock the door. Physically lock it. Deadbolt, chain, everything. I'm 10 minutes out. Lucien's leaving the meeting now. Do not open the door. Do not engage with him. If he gets inside, he can't. The elevator requires key cards. He could have copied one, could have bribed security, could have any number of ways inside, so lock down and wait. I'm coming." The line went dead. Celine ran to the door, throwing every lock, checking twice that the deadbolt was engaged. The chain lock looked flimsy suddenly, decorative rather than functional. How much force would it actually withstand? Her phone buzzed again. "I'm in the lobby. The night guard remembers me from when we were together. Let me up, Celine, or I'll cause a scene down here. I'll tell everyone that Lucien Moretti is holding you prisoner, that you're being controlled, that you need rescue." "How do you think that plays out?" She typed with shaking hands. "The police are on their way. Leave now or you'll be arrested. Liar. You didn't call the police, you called Moretti, which means I have maybe 8 minutes before his people arrive to disappear me. That's enough time for us to talk. So let me up, or I start screaming in the lobby about kidnapping and domestic violence and watch how fast actual police show up. Your choice." He was right. If Adrian caused a scene in the lobby, building security would call police. Real police. Who would ask questions about why a woman was living in a known criminal's penthouse? Who might start looking into Lucien's business more closely than was safe? Adrian knew exactly what leverage he still had. Not physical threat. Public exposure. Celine's mind raced. She could let him up, keep him talking until Carlo arrived, but that meant being alone with him in an enclosed space. Meant trusting that he actually was unarmed. Meant gambling her safety against his promise that he just wanted to talk. Or she could call his bluff. Let him cause a scene, let police get involved. Deal with the complications that followed. Except that protecting herself might mean exposing Lucien to scrutiny he couldn't afford. She was still calculating when the elevator chimed. Her blood turned to ice. Someone had called the elevator to this floor. Someone with access codes. Someone who'd bypassed building security. Celine grabbed the heaviest object within reach, a marble bookend shaped like a rearing horse. Not much of a weapon, but something. The elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped out, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. Unwashed, unshaven, wild-eyed with the kind of desperate energy that preceded violence or breakdown or both. He smiled when he saw her standing in the hallway between the elevator and the apartment door. "Hi, Celine." "Get back in the elevator." "Can't. Already coming up here was burning my last bridge. Might as well finish the conversation." He moved slowly toward her, his hands visible and empty. "I'm not armed. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a man who loved you so much he crossed an ocean and risked his life to see you one more time. That's romantic, right? That's the kind of devotion women are supposed to want. That's stalking. That's obsession. That's you refusing to accept rejection even when it's delivered with threats of murder." "He can't murder me if there are witnesses." Adrian gestured vaguely toward the building's interior security cameras. "This is all being recorded, which means if I disappear now, there's evidence, documentation. Police will have questions Moretti can't answer. So really, I've got all the power here, because killing me publicly costs more than letting me walk away." "Then walk away." "After I say what I came to say." Adrian stopped about 6 feet from her, close enough to talk normally, far enough that she could theoretically react if he lunged. "I forgive you, Celine, for all of it. The theft, the lies, the betrayal. I forgive you because I understand you were scared, confused, manipulated by a man whose entire existence is based on controlling people through fear. But I can save you from that. We can leave together, right now. Walk out of this building and start over somewhere Moretti can't reach us. Somewhere you can remember who you were before he convinced you that his protection was love. His protection is love, because it lets me breathe, because it doesn't demand I become smaller to deserve it, because it treats my fear as unacceptable instead of inevitable." Celine's voice steadied as she spoke. "You want to know the difference between you and Lucien? You controlled me because you were afraid I'd leave if you didn't. He protects me because he's terrified of what happens if he fails. That's love, Adrian. Not what we had. Never what we had." Adrian's expression twisted. "He's killed people for you. And you strangled me for being 20 minutes late. Which one of those sounds like love?" I wouldn't have actually." He stumbled over the lie, unable to commit to it fully. "You pushed me to that. You made me so crazy with worry that I couldn't control—" "No, you couldn't control me. That's what made you crazy. Not worry, not love. Just the realization that I was a person instead of a possession. That's his rhetoric, his brainwashing. He's turned you against me. You turned me against you by yourself. Through choices you made, actions you took, hands you put on my throat. This is your responsibility, Adrian, not mine, not Lucien's, yours. And the fact that you still can't acknowledge that you're still rewriting history to make yourself the victim, means you learned nothing, changed nothing. You're exactly the same man you were when I left, just more desperate." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "I crossed an ocean for you. I didn't ask you to. I risked my life. For you, not for me. You risked your life to prove something to yourself, to demonstrate that you still have control, that you can still make me afraid. That's why you came back, Adrian. Not for reconciliation, for power. One last chance to make me flinch. That's not— You're twisting everything." "I'm telling the truth, finally, without fear. That's what Lucien gave me. Permission to stop being afraid of you. Permission to say all the things I swallowed for 3 years because speaking them wasn't safe. So here's the truth you need to hear. I never loved you. I loved who you pretended to be in the beginning before I realized the charm was packaging for cruelty. I stayed because I was financially trapped and emotionally manipulated into believing I couldn't survive without you. And I left because staying meant dying, literally or spiritually, doesn't matter which. That's the truth. That's what happened. And no amount of ocean crossing changes it." Adrian stared at her with something between shock and rage. "You bitch!" There it is, the man underneath the performance, the one who only appears when control slips. That's who you are, Adrian, not the romantic who crossed oceans, Not the victim of theft and betrayal, just a man who's angry that his favorite toy escaped and won't come back to the box. I could hurt you. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Right now.